Hey, good everything Nubians. Apologies.
Good everything, everyone.
We had to catch up. I was
Yeah, we was
supposed to call you during my 8-hour drive from
no,
North
no, no,
Carolina,
no.
so
You
we could have done that. But we had a
called
lot.
me and texted me, and I didn't have the phone nowhere near.
I was
You
like,
was all out, and then by the time I saw it, you was already up and down.
yeah, I was in Jersey by then. Well, I was like, man, 4 o'clock in the morning, it's dark outside. I can't see. It's
Oh my
raining. I'm out
God!
there driving like Mr. Magoo. I'm like the road hog to the truckers, and I was like, I need somebody to help
I
me.
was so
Just,
sorry.
I was
Because
like, well,
normally at 4 o'clock in the morning, I might be up.
well,
So, but I wasn't. And then by the time I didn't even look at the phone, because by the time I got to that day, I'm like, oh no, where's the phone? I don't know. Because like you say, when school, the last day of school was Wednesday, the law school shut down. And then after that, I didn't pick up a phone again. And then when I saw you, I was, oh man, Karen. By then
I was,
you had seen your mom and them, you didn't seen the fam, everybody, and everybody who's been traveling now.
yeah.
I didn't see were there as many people on the road.
Coming down, yes, it was like I got hemmed up around DC, Virginia. It was like stop and go, stop and go. But I think I left a little too late. So I didn't want to make that mistake because I was live yesterday on the radio. So I was like, I gotta be
Amazing.
back before 3 at least. I don't want to be running in on two, Hot Wheels. But
You don't miss the
yeah.
meant to mute every day. You got back in time to do your show live.
Yeah, it was good too because we launched another drop for the global majority. This is a version of it, but we did a black on black, just special black. It's so dope.
I
But
saw on social media you got a pants. Wait, you got a top and a bottom in this? Because somebody
yeah,
was like, I asked Carrie Hunter for it, and she did it. They was all celebrating.
no, yeah, we have the
That's the top
hoodie
end.
and the jogger to go with it. Yeah, top
The
and bottom.
jogger. That's what it was.
Yeah, the jogger. So yeah, so people can work out or
It's
just
truly a global majority too.
yeah. I mean, it's we were talking off mic, but to have something in your mind that you've wanted to do, because for me it's not about the apparel, it's about the messaging. And we're going to be doing a lot. This company that I'm working with, they have licenses for some of y'all's favorite athletes, people, some obscure things. We're going to do a pass the baton series. Like I want to use this clothes to send messages and mantras and keep us centered. Growing up in the 90s with cross colors and Carl Kanai and Fubu, it was good to wear for us, by us. But what happened next, and what was sustainable? So, we're working on a young, youth line. So kids can wear things. People ask, well, who is Sarah, who is Ida B. Wells and who is, who is Jim Thorpe really?
How about
Yeah, and there'll be a story behind it that everybody will know and be able to talk about. So I'm looking
that
forward to
is a cultural memory making and movement and memory? This is where we have to, it has to be for us, by us. And the 90s, it's amazing, isn't it? The 80s and 90s are like another century. Well, they are technically another century, but to young people, I thought I heard you playing something as you were coming in. I expect you probably
yeah.
raise the name of this new ancestor in a minute, who has virtually disappeared in some ways. Now I would say virtually disappeared, but go ahead. I mean, I suspect
To that point, we were talking about school, and I teach, as some of you know, at Hunter College, and I give a gift to my students to delve into their passions. And so every semester, there's kids that like music, and there's one young lady who's into 90s and 2000s R&B, and she was born like 2010 or whatever. I was like, damn. But yeah, so I say, how'd you get involved? And she said, my mom was playing, she would play Mary J. Blige and all this. So she's like, dialed in to this genre. And I was thinking about today and how sad it is, because when we were growing up, the radio would earworm us into submission with a song that would play for the entire year. So, we got introduced to, of course, Michael Jackson and Prince and Donna Summers and, Earth, Wind, and Fire. But those songs became like songs in the key of life, indelibly etched into our childhood memories and psyches because they just played on loop. And now today, kids, they're on Spotify or whatever, and they get to select, curate their own with no institutional knowledge. So I'm growing up with Jerry Butler, and I'm growing up with Nina Simone. I'm growing up, because that's what my parents played, and now the radio, and now there's this mixture, and you see the artists that were born out of that generation because they're able to draw. These kids don't have anything to draw on. So I played the
well,
twins.
They have everything to draw on, no focal points.
Right. It's chaos. It's just chaos.
Exactly.
No centering. I think Reese Colbert put up a whole thing. She said there was a whole genre of I'm cheating music, and she played Shaka Khan, and it's like me and Mrs. Jones, and like there was all of this. Like,
Philadelphia. That's right.
As we lay, and some people started adding to it, and it's like
Shirley Murdoch said, but instead we got
we should have counted the cost. That's your line.
Counted up the cost. There was a whole genre, wasn't it?
Yeah. And even Stevie Wonder got into it.
Part-time as the backup singer. As your male friends to ask for me. When you hear Luther in the back. That's Luther on part-time level. No question.
Out of here.
Yeah, Luther was singing back up with Stevie Wonder because I kept thinking that sounded like Luther. And then I looked it up. It was like the first time I heard Luther singing back up for Roberta Flack with Donny Hathaway and with Peabo Bryson. Heaven Can Wait. That sounded like Luther. Luther was on backup, and of course, Luther was on backup with somebody you better talk about too. She came back up for him.
God, okay, so let's first say,
but yeah, there's a whole genre. My God, you bring it back.
I'm like this generation, those twins that were listening to Phil Collins, in the air at night, and they were like, oh my God, and it's got like 9 million views. I played that, and I was like, there's a whole opportunity for young people to bring back music, for this generation because they don't have any grounding in it. But I'm like really grateful that I was born in a time to have, to have that bridge stretch from, all, James Brown and them. That wasn't my growing up music, and all of the older, Frankie Lyman, and then coming here, and then they remixed it into the 90s with the Isley Brothers and Charlie Wilson, and 2000s, and even all of Mary J. Blige is all from another generation, and it's like it's new to that generation, but it kept going. Pharrell, of course, borrowed from Marvin Gaye and other people, but it's interesting. Roberta Flack, you brought up, who cannot no longer sing. She has I mean, it's like so sad. And then we just had an ancestor that was announced today, Irene Cara, who brought us fame and sparkle and Flashdance, won an Oscar and I think a Grammy for
Gold Globe. In fact, what's interesting, because she didn't win it as an actress, it doesn't resonate, but she's the second African person to win an Academy Award. The first was Hattie McDaniel. The second was Irene Cara for the song. You know what I'm saying? She didn't win as an actress, so we don't think about that. But she was the second Latina. Rita Moreno won for West Side Story. The second Latina, Irene Cara. It's like we think about her songs. We don't realize Irene Cara was a beast, yo.
Well, she originally was going to be on Fame as a dancer.
How about that?
And then they wrote the role of Coco just for her. And that gave us Debbie Allen. That's your connection.
Come on, Debbie Allen, Coco Hernandez. I mean, that Coco Hernandez role. Yeah, but it's funny you talk about this question of institutions and how we have these connections, these genealogies. Her father was a musician. Her father was a jazz musician, Gaspar. That was her last name, Escalera, Irene Cara Escalera. Her father was out of Puerto Rico. Mother was Cuban. She said they had me on. She had two older brothers who were ancestors. One was an opera singer, a whole opera singer. The other one was a professor of music and a play. She said, I was playing instruments since I was like 6, 7 years old. They had me out there working. She did a Broadway show, or maybe off Broadway, with a bunch of other children. Two of the children who were in there, Giancarlo Esposito was one of the kids, like 6, 7 year olds, right? And Stephanie Mills was in the cast. Irene Cara didn't just show up like, oh, we saw her singing on the subway. No, I'm a trained musician, dancer. She said she wrote, what was the song? She wasn't in Flashdance. That's right.
She wasn't. She sang the song for it though.
Yeah, she said when they came to her, they wanted to write the song, and she said, I'm not in the movie. They said, well, no, we want you to write songs. She wrote that song in 4 hours. He said, I wasn't even in the movie, and then it just came and cleaned up.
I actually drove and I remember this because that song actually was one of the drivers. It's like Ben. It's like Michael Jackson. That song drove that movie. Like I know I begged my mother to take me to see Ben because I thought that Michael Jackson was going to be in the movie, and it didn't come on. And like it's about some damn rats that are eating up. I was like so mad. I was scared and mad. Like, where's Michael Jackson? And where's the song?
What?
Like, what the? Yeah. So no, it's why we're here. So as I'm talking through this and listening to you, we started this journey. And I was just telling you, we're toddlers, we're toddlers in terms of formation. Well, the thing that inspired me to like be so happy that you agreed to do this is that there's so much missing memory. There's so much missing information. Absolutely. And what you do so masterfully is weave in and connect those dots for us and make it really like, oh, this is why we should lean in. And so as we were building out narrative, it was like, all right, this is going to be like our Library of Alexandria. Like 1,000 years from now, people are going to be able to come in and click on things as we start to, develop and know, not just here's a biography of somebody, but this is why this person's important. And in just 5 minutes, you gave us Irene Cara, things that I didn't, and I grew up like, yes, Irene Cara.
Me too.
And
we sincere. I mean, now, when we stop and think about it, we remember. You remember she played Myrlie Evers.
No, when?
Living. Myrlie Evers wrote her biography for Us to Living. Irene Cara played her in the I think it was her. She played the daughter. She didn't play and she also in Roots, the Next Generation, played Alex Haley's mother. I mean, people think about it for the songs. It's like, no, you gotta see it. Irene Cara was in the original cast of Electric Company. She used to talk about Morgan Freeman and Bill Cosby on the set. She said Morgan Freeman was this little skinny dude walking around, easy reader. See, we remember that. Your students, my students don't remember that. They look at Morgan Freeman now. It's like, no, Morgan Freeman was on Electric Company, and so was Irene Cara as a little girl. So like you said, I mean, people like that, and it's crazy because what was she, 62?
63. Yeah.
So when somebody like that makes transition, and we talked about this when we talked about Prince, maybe the first summer when we were getting into these, for us, everybody in that age range, it marks a moment for us that is really institutional memory. And we owe it to the young people to help them not only see these individuals, because the social structure narrates them for the things they know them for. And then the young people pick up on that. No. All of your faves. Irene Cara said, I was trying to sound like Donna Summer. So, I mean, when they said I sound like Donna Summer, I said, well, that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, so young people don't know the connections because the social structure, like you said, just drops stuff in. And now it has exploded any central place like a radio station or a television network, television station, or a newspaper. And so now they just get to pick, or at least they think they're picking, because the algorithm is curating. And so they don't be, again, this space, like you say, our baby steps.
Yeah.
This is a space where we start, who are we to each other?
But it requires, sitting in, because, as a journalist, the background, the training, you're trained to pick those moments to tell a story. But if you don't have the knowledge, right? So who's writing these obituaries and who's writing these features and they don't have the grounding in culture, and I often say to you, and it's not actually true because I grew up in a household where the ISIS papers and Asada were on our, in our reading library. So, my father did infuse that in me, but, there's so many of us that they hire that have no, we are black in skin, and some of our parents wanted us so badly to be Block and to, elevate beyond the, beyond, those people. There's this video circulating that I want to share with you. Maybe next week we'll do it. And it talks about Black people migrating to LA. And there's this convening of Black people, like these people, we came here for this, but they're coming in their bare feet. And, it's this kind of like classic. Somebody dropped it in one of my timelines. I was like, I'm gonna pull this for another day because we do need to talk about class. And I was smiling because I know like my dad might have wanted to shield me from like, Newark and him growing up in like some rough conditions. And, so, you don't play with those kids. And I was like, but it's in my DNA. I can't even help it. I'm going to be sneaking across town and I'm going to play with everybody, and you're wrong. And like, even as a little kid, I was like, that don't feel right. I'm not gonna ostracize somebody because they were born in poverty. That I know you're running away from the horrors of the trauma of you growing up with rats and roaches and living in a 2 bedrooms with 8 children and being in a bed with your brothers and y'all teenagers, 4 people in one full-size bed. Yeah, that's traumatic. And you never want me to feel that. And I appreciate it. At the same time, we can't shun people because of the conditions that they were raised in, because you got out, and there's this whole, well, I got out and we've made this, and these people, they're uncouth. They don't know how to behave. Well, train them. If you gotta, like, what are we doing? So even in this space, the bridge of, like, there's so many folk who are discovering this, and it's not, I hope we're not coming at it from this erudite elite space, but like it's accessible. But this knowledge has to be gotten so that we can put together, not run out with half a pieces of stuff, and then like, oh, well, this is what I know because you sat and watched the YouTube rabbit hole that told you about a bunch of stuff, but there's no context and there's no beginning, so I just, like, you have centered the whole thing. I'm like, all right, so who came before this person? All right, so who came before this person?
No.
All right, so who started? All right, so before Spotswood Robinson, there was no Thurgood Marshall. Okay, well, so Paulie Murray. Okay, let's, and so it's really boom, 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 and then we can tell a full story. So LeBron James going out with a Madam C.J. Walker film, I know he thought he was doing a great thing, but you disrespected Annie Malone, who actually sat in the bush with somebody to teach about hair growth. She had the chemical formula that this woman and her marketing husband stole, and went out and marketed something that they didn't create. And Annie Malone was a millionaire, but you don't talk about that, and it wasn't colorism. But if you don't know that, then you're going to, oh, Madam C.J. Walker, because of marketing and media and the people telling stories that have no foundational knowledge, and you just grab onto that thing because it's sexy. But yeah, we have to do the work and not, to disrespect Madam C.J. Walker, who was amazing.
No question.
But to then also say Annie Malone was amazing, and she wouldn't have had in her 40s an opportunity to even be a millionaire if that woman didn't set the framework to empower women, Black women, to become their own businesses. And I know there might have been somebody before Annie Malone, because I'm gonna keep pulling that thread till we get to the beginning, and it's gonna probably lead us to the continent, because who was doing hair on the continent? Which country? Like, exactly. And that's the work. So when y'all go out to Egypt next summer, to Kemet, to Nubia, that's the work, not for vacation and for sightseeing, but to continue to bring your brick to put together and piece together our story. So it doesn't start in 1619, doesn't even start in the 1500s. It starts thousands of years. I'm watching Black Adam. They took it before, I was like, okay.
Did you see how they mixed it up in there?
Yeah, I'm not mad at it, because again,
I'll be mad at it. Right.
There was a before, and if we don't center the before, then the after just becomes a chasing of, please accept me. You ain't got to never accept me.
You ain't
not gonna do is erase me.
Come on now. Come on.
Erase me. No.
This is a word. This is a word on this Indigenous People Day weekend. This is a word. You ain't never got to accept me. Center the before. You just dropped another bar. I think we're gonna need some hoodies, because I want that too. I'm gonna center the before and whatever you want to put on the back. This is, the Egyptians would call this sebait, right? The young people say bars or facts, but sebait, it translates as teaching. That's a teaching. Center the before. Because you're right. We want to start the beginning. Well, what date? No. See, you always looking for numbers. We're looking for the beginning. In the beginning. In the beginning, ... It's very simple. This was the fundamental. When I first came to Howard that first semester, they hired me late, so I didn't get a chance to pick my own textbooks, and I had to use John Hope Franklin, Revered Elder, From Slavery to Freedom. There's a new edition. The high school edition just came out. You just got that laying around, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, because I just got it. Elton Brooks Higginbotham has taken over now. John Hope Franklin's an ancestor. Beautiful book, lots of information, framework. Can't use it. Why? Because, well, first of all, we start with the title. From Slavery to Freedom. I used to say, when I first came at Howard, I said, okay, we're going to do this. What if the book we need is From Freedom, ... You see, you started here, you end up here. Martin Luther King, and you call it progress. But what you're raising, I love that. Center the before. You center the before, you can't title a book like that. Because we didn't start with slavery. No human being did.
And I mean, it's difficult, because I'm watching colleagues and people who came before me, and we have been conditioned and trained a certain kind of way to center not just them. I mean, not just the now, but them. We have been conditioned to find them in every story so that they would be interested in the story. So we have to find their entry point in every story. And I'm like, no, we don't. No, we don't. It's perfectly okay. They'll be all right. They'll be all right. They'll figure it out, or they won't, or they'll just miss out on all of this knowledge. But you can't be angry with the pursuit of truth. And if the pursuit of truth bothers you so much that you want to just completely obliterate anybody doing it, then I have to ask you how fragile you are, and how weak you are. And that's really what you're displaying, is your weakness and your fragility, not your strength and power. If you have to erase something in order to be, as Toni Morrison, if you have to stand on somebody to be tall, like that's everything. So we're going to double down on this.
Well, I mean, it's so funny. There was a brother who's an ancestor now. He's been an ancestor about 10 years, Reggie Bryant. He was on a black radio station in Philadelphia, WHAT. And he had a show that used to come on in the afternoons, Monday through Friday, called In Pursuit of Truth. Brilliant journalist, one of the founding members of the Society of Black Journalists Philadelphia chapter. I'm sure this is and we talked about, I think we mentioned this before. I don't know if you, I'm trying to remember if you said whether I know you think you had rubbed shoulders with him, but I don't know if you knew him well. Chuck Stone. Yeah, Aisel Moore, who was still around, worked for the Inquirer at the time. But Reggie's show was called In Pursuit of Truth. And he would start every afternoon on this black radio station. And let me pause here and say that one of the many centering, I love this, center the before. When we center ourselves in time and space, like you said, everybody has a point of entry because everybody has memory. Everybody has a lineage. Everybody has a genealogy. So even last week, we started talking about those past books. All of the people who chimed in from all over the world, the Caribbean, and then we on YouTube, people started putting in where they were. And I mean, and this is the beauty of it. We all contribute. So anyway, Reggie, his catchphrase in that show, which was a talk show, he said, "It isn't what we know that's wrong. It's what we know that just ain't so." So his thing was, we may not ever get to the truth, but we're looking for the truth. So when you said that, Prof, it just reminded me of that ancestor who is one of many, because we know Black Talk Radio, which is a black thing. And we think about our Africana Studies framework, science and technology, the use of radio, like the use of newspaper, like the use of any form of broadcast media, that's a form of technology. We did not invent the radio. Although, well, let's not get into that. But in terms of communication, we use the technology to communicate. But what we're communicating, those ways of knowing, that cultural meaning making, that movement and memory, we know that in addition to the music, which is often in the social structure we find ourselves in the modern world, the main thing that those who look at us as providers of spectacle really are interested in, when they think of Black radio, they're thinking about music. What they're not thinking about is, and those of you who are in Atlanta, for example, if you go over on Auburn Avenue, we know that the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee headquarters was right there in the same block as the Black radio station. Whenever there was something going on, Dr. King or one of the lieutenants from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference would go to that block, to the Black radio station, and make the announcements about when the rally was, or to spread the message on this, because Black people listen to the radio, and it wasn't just for music. We know that the DJs, Georgie Woods in Philadelphia, for example, comes to mind. The great Georgie Woods. James Spady did a whole book on Georgie Woods, I'm Only a Man. But he wasn't alone. The DJs often also doubled as the news people. So something went on in the community. You heard it in Los Angeles. You heard it in New York. You heard it. I mean,
Frankie Crocker.
Come on now, Frankie, no question. The Chief Rocker. No, wait, what was his nickname? Was it Chief?
Yeah, that was Chief Rocker,
yeah,
Frankie Crocker.
Frankie Crocker, no question. I mean, WLIB, WDAS in Philadelphia again. I mean, and so it's interesting, isn't it? Because even with us, and between us and the young people who we have in our classrooms now, the 20-somethings, the teenagers, there's a generation. So there were moments, I think about Cosmic Kev in Philly or Funkmaster Flex in New York, when the OJ thing went down. I want to say, was it during the playoffs?
Yeah, basketball. It was during the basketball playoffs. I was watching.
I thought that's what it was, right? Because they had a split screen right here.
Yeah. What is this Bronco?
Right.
Is that OJ?
I remember, and all the hip hop DJs were narrating the chase at the same time as the game. I mean, so there's still, I mean, it doesn't look the same every generation, but there's still this notion that if you are of African descent in a public space, you have an additional obligation. And that's not to say that folks who aren't of African descent in those spaces don't feel like they have one, but the point you're raising and using the case of our most recent public ancestor, Irene Cara Escalera, as an example, the New York Times may have posted, since we went live, an obituary, but I hadn't seen it as of this morning on the site. It'll be in the papers, maybe dated, because you know how they do. You know better than I do, right? Then they write the obituary and then they wait. But for somebody like this, who was sudden and younger, they don't have one. They'll put a notice and then they'll write it later. But what they're going to do, and I'm fascinated, but there was there was a documentary about the New York Times obituary writers. It may be called Obit, but it followed maybe a half dozen of them. And you know their bylines. If you read the New York Times, you know these obituary writers. So when they get somebody like Irene Cara, they're going to say, okay, man, Irene Cara. They're going to assign it to one of their top cats, and then they're going to spend, they are right now, while we're here, they're calling everybody. They done gone through, they done put the whole $1 billion might of the New York Times newspaper mortgage. And when they, whatever they write to what you just raised, Professor Hunter, and that's why I'm looking down. I always take, so you said, what'd you say journalists do? You pick these pieces, you pick these moments to tell a story, to narrate. The narrative they generate is going to be in the New York Times, the narrative in the Los Angeles Times, the narrative in Billboard, the narrative on the website of the Rolling Stone. None of it is going to sound like what we're talking about now, with many of the same facts. None of it is going to sound like this because that's not their narrative. They're not trying to narrate it. Perhaps they will mention that Irene Cara had to sue her record company, because they certainly will read the interviews with her where she talks about the fact that for the better part of a decade, 8 or 9 years, she was in a lawsuit, didn't get a penny for her Academy Award winning songs, didn't get a penny for her Grammy, 2 Grammy winning songs, didn't get a penny. They had her hostage. Didn't have distribution. The record company, the Bee Gees had already walked. What's the sister's name? If I can't have you, I don't want nobody, baby. If I can't have you, Yvonne Elliman they walked. Irene Cara stuck in the deal, didn't get money.
Yeah,
she finally won, but
Yvonne Elliman.
That's the Yvonne Elliman. Thank you. If I can't have you, I don't want nobody, baby. I mean, but the point is that during that decade and then afterward, they put the murder mouth on her professionally. They told the rest of the record companies don't sign her. So Irene Cara, you want to know what happened to Irene Cara? The social structure happened to Irene Cara. Irene Cara came out of a governance formation. She came out of ways of knowing. If we want to talk about Afro-Latino, whatever that means or doesn't mean, she was one. She was one from 2 different islands between her mother and her father's bloodlines, and she came up in the music. Her father was known in salsa. She was performing with her daddy at 7 or 8 years old on the bandstand in New York.
And I was going to say, New York, we call them New York Puerto Ricans. They know they're black.
No question. Come on now.
They know they're black. They don't make the distinction. And those of you who grew up in New York, New Jersey with Spanish-speaking neighbors and relatives, they rock with us.
Come on. And we rock with them.
Yeah, there was no distinction except they put a little bit of more garlic in their fried chicken.
But it's funny you mentioned that, because I've read interviews and seen interviews with Irene Cara where she talks about coming of age during that period, because she was born in 62? I guess it would be 62.
59.
59?
Yeah, she was 63.
63. I can't do the math. Okay. 59. So 69, 79. That's right. She came of age. She talks about coming of age during that period when hip hop mixed all its ingredients together. So it was nothing for her to come into that space and tap into that rhythm, tap into that cultural meaning making. And she brought it forth in her music. So, I mean, but the obituary in the New York Times is going to put front and center the songs. You see, it's going to put forward the songs, and it's going to talk about the awards. It'll probably mention that she disappeared because she sued and had controversy. But what it's not going to say is that once she got her rights and the money started coming in, Irene Cara said, I'm semi-retired. She did go back out. She had a band group Caramel something or other where she performed with. But she said, I'm really, I'm in Florida. I got my family around me. The royalty checks come in. I don't really have to work. I make more money not working than working, and so I'm good. And we don't know how and what the circumstances were for her to make transition. But I tell you, of all the Irene Cara songs that she is known for, you got the Flash Dance, you got Fame, you got all of that coming together. You remember DC Cab?
Yes, yes.
Bill Maher is as corny now as he was when he was that knit tie wearing corny dude in DC Cab, right? Remember, she had the song in there, The Dream.
Yes.
That's my favorite Irene Cara. Irene Cara said, it's really great for me to be here. I've went over the pain and the fear. It's been so very hard through the years. Been looking through a rainbow of tears. And still I never really let go of the dream. I mean, it's a beautiful song. And when you hear about how she created these songs, she said, I'm talking about my life. It's really great for me to be here. It's 1983. Right? I mean, and people now what they'll write in the social structure obituaries, they'll talk about she was in disco and she was they'll probably mention her early years, but what you won't get is the feel. So what you said, why are you telling this story? You are picking this story to tell us a larger story. And that's what we're doing here, because we're not doing this as two individuals. We're not doing this as 100 or 1,000 or 2,000 or 5 or 10 or 20,000 as people keep going. We're doing it as a community, because we have to do something that we wouldn't have had to do if we hadn't been taken. We have to create a we. And the value of this space, which is increasing, we were talking before we came into the larger space about just the influence we're all having on each other and on folk who either aren't yet ready to come or trying to figure out what do we do, how do we do. This is what you do. Relax. Because as Professor Hunter said, we're centering the before, and we don't care. We don't, whether you like us, not like us, because when you're trying to pour, and you are pouring clean glasses of water, you are a value added to humanity. And so what a beautiful thing. Wouldn't it be what a beautiful thing if the New York Times printed tomorrow's Sunday edition of an obituary of, and even the language obituary, but we won't even get into that, an obituary of Irene Cara, where it started with a kind of grounding in who her family is, who her mom and daddy are, who the people she worked with are. What she said about Bill Cosby. She said Bill Cosby treated all the children on the set of Electric Company very well. I didn't see any of that stuff, this pervy stuff y'all talk. But see, that doesn't fit the story. What story are you trying to tell? What story are you trying to tell? I mean, go interview. I mean, Mary Alice is an ancestor now, but some of the young people who were in the cast of Sparkle when she was in there, Sparkle Williams, talk about how, they were teenagers and they had to go to school 4 hours a day as they could work. So when you see an Irene Cara, when you see any of us who are public facing, meaning social structure facing, meaning white facing, you're looking at someone who is being pulled into a story to be told by a structure that has agendas. Well, we have agendas too, but our first agenda is creating a we, because there wasn't a we before, and we've talked about that many times. So yeah, y'all check somewhere, because I'm going from memory on For Us the Living. I'll look here in the chat. Maybe I can look at it. I don't know if she played Merle, or if she played what's Rena. Rena is Merle and Megger's daughter. She's now over the Merle and Megger Evers Foundation in Jackson. I want to say she played Merle Evers, but at any rate, yeah, because she kind of looked like Merle Evers, and Merle Evers was very young, of course, when her
Yep, she did. She played Merle Evers.
played
Yep.
Merle Evers. Okay, good, thank you. That was like, yeah, because I remember that. I mean, because
Yes.
yeah.
I don't remember. I mean, it was 83. I wasn't leaning into the Mega Evers story then.
No, I don't. I'm sure I wasn't either. I mean, this came, as an adult when I declared war against white supremacy and said I would spend all of my rest of my breath trying to collect as much memory as possible and then hold up a mirror to folks. I'm sure somewhere in storage I have the deteriorating VHS of From Us the Living.
That's crazy. And you know, when you bring up Sparkle, there's no Dream Girl without Sparkle.
Oh, no question about it.
Broadway play, or the one starring Shirley Ralph and them, and the one starring Beyonce and them. You know, so even that, you think about Sparkle, it's like the batons being passed and picked up and run forward and remixed. The music, all of that has to be reclaimed.
See, you just said something, Prof. The gathering that will be necessary to place Irene Cara Escalera in context, in a governance context, would be so beautiful. Now, there'll be a BT Awards thing where they sing the hits,
Right.
but what would it look like if you made a few calls and your producers made a few calls and you got Giancarlo Esposito and Stephanie Mills to talk about they were 7 or 8 year olds together in that play? What would it look like to get, in other words, the governance thing opens the whole thing up. Y'all want her for the 4 or 5 songs,
Right.
But see, as Anna Julia Cooper said, a generation, 2, 3 generations before, when and where I enter, the race enters with me. So Irene Cara is not just the producer of some wildly popular songs and a triple threat and an actress and a dancer. No, she's a product of governance formations, ways of knowing, cultural meaning making. When you saw her literally in her work, you heard movement and memory. And the beautiful thing about it is that story will keep until it's told. Because I guarantee you right now, nobody is reaching out to ask that. She recorded with the Harlem Children's Choir when she was like 8 years old. Now, who's calling the Harlem Children's Choir now for a quote? Not the New York Times. They worried about the Grammys and the Academy Award. Why? Because that's who she is to us. No, but who is she to us, though? Who's the us? The us is the Spanish-speaking African community. Yeah. Because y'all want to come up with some beef between blacks and Latinos. Like that's even 2 categories. What you gonna do with Irene Cara? Well, first thing we're gonna drop her last name. She performed as Irene Cara. Okay, we'll put her back there, put the Escalera back on. And while you're at it, go get her father, who was known for the salsa, who was known for the music of Puerto Rico, who was known for Afro-Latin music, as you would call it. I mean, in other words, that would be something. If you had like it would be a tribute. I guess that would be, I don't know. I mean, I'm obviously not a producer. That's another of your.
But even as you're talking, because man, I will never have Alzheimer's messing with you, because you keep me firing off things that are probably dormant. And I'm sitting here going, because I had this conversation with somebody and I'm fighting with them. And I'm like, stop thinking the way they taught you to think.
Yes.
I'm fighting with somebody because I'm like, think about it this way. And they are like struggling with it. And I said, we do documentaries and docuseries and tributes a certain kind of way because they set a blueprint.
That's right.
Or how they can market and get advertising. And like it's designed to make money.
That's right.
But what if you designed it to make a difference? What if you designed it? Like, what would that look like? And what you're talking about is like, yeah, whatever we do, like this, we could have done lower thirds and had it really beautiful. I mean, I have the means to be able to bring in a production crew and we can come in and film it in a nice place. And we're going to go on the road.
One day you do that just for fun to see what it look like, but it wouldn't, right? But why keep it like this, Prof?
Because it's real, authentic. This is who we are. We show up.
Yes.
Faces washed, teeth brushed. Let's talk, because it's the information. And if you get caught up in all of the bells and whistles, if you can't watch this because it doesn't have the right thing, then you're not even supposed to. Maybe this is not for you, So I purposefully decided to never, make In Class with Carr this anything more. Somebody's like, should it be? I wish this was a Roku channel. Okay, but Roku gonna take it just like this. If it, it's like, why do we have to do something? Oh, because it has to do what? To get more people to watch? Because that's it. So
you said it centered before. I mean, this started in the middle of a global crisis, and that out of which emerged, that is the foundation of our strength. We're not coming to you. I mean, it breaks my heart when I see, and I know you've seen more of them than I have, friends and colleagues who show up in the glossy joint after they've been with us the whole time, and you look and you say, I'm sure that suit is uncomfortable. Look at it drinking. Is that rouge under your cheeks, bro? In other words, I mean, the glossy joint, like I was in the I was in the newsstand a couple of days ago with my man Steven at the newsroom talking about the World Cup, which is hilarious. And I think you should probably mention that now. The
Yes.
brother Mbolo from Sweden, no, from Cameroon. Did you see that one?
I have. I got like the left corner of my right eye watching the.
Yeah, no. And I'm not watching it all because what's going on in Qatar or Qatar. In fact, there's no.
Cutter. I think it's pronounced Cutter.
Well, that's the thing. I just read a long article on the Financial Times where they were saying there's no right way to pronounce it because the Arab in Arabic it would be one like Qatar, but he said whatever the guttural is, there are all kind of glosses of it. But the way that they for the better part of a decade had people engaged in virtual slave labor to basically build whole cities for that. I'm good. And the fact that they should probably rename the World Cup the Africa Cup because the European countries are Africans. I mean, which brings me to the point. I was talking to Stephen the other day about the brother Briel Mbolo. Mbolo plays for and my nephew would kill me. I don't know the positions. I mean, my nephew in England right now with the rosters in the Caribbean. Yeah, look out for Ellington. He out there playing soccer in the UK with the Africans. My sister and brother-in-law made sure he was with African families. So he's good. Afro-Caribbean family. But Mbolo scored the winning goal for Sweden. I think they won 1-0 or 1-0 or whatever they call it against Cameroon. But he's from Cameroon.
Yo, it's so confusing.
Yeah, but here's the crazy thing, though, Prof. This is the beautiful thing about
striker. He's a striker.
He's a striker. Thank you, striker, which would make sense. And then you probably see then, if you see the story, do you see how he celebrated? He didn't celebrate. He said, we won the game. Our job was to win the game, but these are my people on the other side. I'm not celebrating.
They said he stood still with an apologetic frown on his face after he scored.
How about that? How about that? And so me and Steven standing there talking. He's Kenyan. And we were talking. I said, bruh, or Baba, as I call him. I said, Baba, would any African play in Europe if the money were the same in Africa? He said, no, it's all about the money. It's all about the money. You're not going to Europe because you like the weather. You're going to Europe because Europe, as John Henry Clark said, that drained its sores on the continent of our birth and then snatched us out and then came back down there looking for stuff and continues to mine, including mining talent, including athletic talent, has, as Walter Rodney wrote, has so quote unquote underdeveloped or had the infrastructure seized that you end up drawn into Europe. And Bolo, in that moment, and we were standing there talking about how we seem as a people, and we know we're not a people, but again, we're creating we's. There is this kind of movement, and this thing is almost like a pendulum. It moves back and forth. But there's this sense that we Africans, now this brother should have been jumping up and down in his blonde hair, blue-eyed teammates' arms. Nah, I'm from Cameroon. And I said, so what happened the next time it rolled around? He playing for Cameroon. And we stood there and started laughing. So I bought a bunch of, I always buy the weeklies and the monthly stuff from him. And there's a long article in The Economist, this week's Economist. And I think I left the bag in the car, otherwise. But there's a long article on Senegal, because Senegal is there too, right? Senegal is there. Cameroon is there. Ghana is there. Ghana scored yesterday, apparently. So the Africans are there in African countries. And of course, the Africans are there. Africa, also known as France, is one of the, because last time the Africans won the World Cup, they were playing for France. But at any rate, the article was about how Senegal has these soccer academies that are cropping up everywhere. And when my nephew, first time he went overseas, he's in Germany, he's in Spain, they got these farm teams and you move up, move out, they all live in Texas. And when he's here, like he trained with the Houston Dynamos, he played in their system. I can't, at some point, whenever his career is over, he gonna keep going to college in the fall and the summer instead of between fall and spring instead of between semesters. Maybe I can get him to come hang out with me at Howard, but because I don't know what the NC2A rules are, but But at any rate, we will come back in a minute, But the academies are in Europe, but now, like the NBA got these academies in Africa They done gone straight in. And then we know the points of entry are folks from the governance formations. Hakeem Olajuwon was down in the, what's the brother's name from Central Africa? I always wave his finger. What's his name? Played for Georgetown. Dikembe Mutombo. They have some academies too. Giannis Antetokounmpo, he's Yoruba man, Nigerian, the Greek freak, whatever social structure. Take that and go to hell, and take the rest of them people with the EU with you. But actually, the cover of this week's Economist is Europe being frozen out, and it's a picture of Europe with ice on it, because of course the winter is coming. But and Russia ain't doing what it used to do. But there's an article about the Senegalese academies, and it's talking about how all this talent is showing up, because that, of course, is the global game, football. Not American football, but global football. So while people here watching NC2A or whatever, playoffs coming, Super Bowl, whatever, the world watching the so-called World Cup. It is a World Cup, not like a World Series where it's American teams playing. By the way, coming up in a couple of months is the World Series of Baseball, which the actual world plays. So I can't wait. That's one of my favorite things. Now, I love baseball. So to watch Puerto Rico, to watch Dominican Republic, to watch Venezuela, and these are all the cats that play in white Major League Baseball during the professional season. Then they play in the world. That's a real World Series, and to see the celebrations. I mean, this is absolutely cultural meaning making. The stands, everybody rocking, the music is playing, everything is beautiful. Anyway, so in the World Cup, you see all these Africans playing. And this article in The Economist is talking about how they have these Senegalese academies. And so I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm reading it. It's fascinating. He said for the first time in World Cup participation, all the teams that are in the World Cup from the continent of Africa directly have African coaches. There has been a significant upgrade and proliferation of the women's teams. More women's teams participated in the Women's African Cup of Nations this year than at any time. So you see that beginning to, take some root. And so I'm reading it, and then here's the punchline. Who is subsidizing Senegal's academies? French professional soccer. And they get top choice of whoever comes out as the best soccer players in the academy. Of course, you want a farm team. You want a farm team for your filthy criminal enterprise. And we talk about filthy criminal enterprise. Let's talk about FIFA. But that's a story for another day. Filthy criminal enterprises in bed. That's why they in Qatar in the first place. Criminal on criminal. And so I'm saying all that to say that, as W.E.B. Du Bois said, the color line belts the world. We have to understand that this social structure is different depending on where you are in the world. But when you step back and look at the rhythms that are similar, they are also the same. Because the same impulse that would say, let's set up a soccer academy, let's set up a football academy in Senegal, and then we'll sit back and see what talent comes out. We'll take you, and then you're in the French national team. That's the same impulse in the slave economic concern, also known as the Southeastern Conference in American college football, in American professional, semi-professional athletics, also known as college football, that wants desperately to pry Deion Sanders out of Jackson, Mississippi, so that he can do his dance up and down the sideline of a white school. And so this hashtag trending last week that had hashtag Coach Prime, and they put him in different coaching, what do you call those, polos? Here's Auburn, here's whatever, Texas Tech, whatever. I don't really care. They're all one big HBCU and one big HWCU as far as I'm concerned. But the reason they got to get him out of there is that, if you stay there, Eddie George, the Tennessee State, you name it, as these black athletes, and now they got a new recruiting class coming in, and they're saying, I saw a couple of guys this week sign with Jackson State. There's a problem. You got a problem. Because this could be the moment when there's a sea change. Imagine, as Steve and I were standing there talking the other day, imagine if the more African players who are superstars stayed and played for their national teams on the continent of Africa, or the teams of their homelands in Africa. Oh, this is going to be a problem. Right. Imagine as more and more women and men of African descent, young women and men of African descent, decide to play for South Carolina State instead of University of South Carolina, or Alabama State instead of University of Alabama, or Auburn, or Jackson State instead of University of Mississippi. I don't give a damn who Lane Clifton is, Jesus Christ, or white Jesus Christ, that is, or Aflac friendly coach of University of Alabama, who Nick Saban. Nobody cares. Because now, if that happens, now we got a problem. So I don't care. We got to throw some money at Deion. So then people say, well, Deion Sanders can afford not to be paid at the level of a top coach. Maybe he can, maybe he can't. But here's the other thing. I'm beginning to read now, and help me with this part because I don't really know the infrastructure. But it seems to me, one of the things I'm seeing now is people saying, well, Deion Sanders can afford to not make as much as he went somewhere else. But what they're going to do is throw all the money at his assistant coaches.
Yeah, that's how that works.
That's how it works, huh?
Yeah, but I'm looking at. Someone said, Vernon in the chat, Deion ain't leaving. No, don't be so hasty.
Don't be so hasty, right?
Because let me come back in. What we do, what we tell ourselves, and I've had to have this conversation with myself is, I could do so much good taking these white people's money. you tell yourself that, right?
Right.
But there's an unspoken contract when you take white people's money. There's a understanding.
Indeed.
And I've had a couple of times in my life where I've done that, and then not just felt obligated, but there is an unspoken and then sometimes spoken contract.
Sometimes
about what you gonna do. I had to F around and find out personally.
Well, you say you had to F around and find it
out and found out. So we both sit here with experiences, right? Okay. We're not just talking out of thin air. We've been through some things, experienced some things. So and that has informed how I move is directly in response to the things that I have come up against, whether it's starting a publishing house, being in business with Simon & Schuster, having $1 million from a venture capital firm called Bear Stearns to do a magazine, or whatever. It puts you in these positions where when you F around enough, and you aren't quote unquote successful, meaning yes, I have all these bestsellers and all that, but I haven't broken out into, because there was always kind of a resistance, I'm going to fight for the things that I want to do. And then they snatch things and then they punish you. Then they, and then you're like, okay, so this is not really my money to do what I want with. It's your money with strings. Somebody in Nubia's like contract. We don't deal in contract. That's white people stuff, because they have to guarantee, and what I also understand about contracts is I have a contract, but there's also a clause in the contract that at any point in time, the contract can be, broken.
Right.
So is it a contract?
Right.
If you can break it because I did something that you didn't approve of, Kyrie just found out about his contract, right? Any point in time, you can find out, F around, find out. So either you are free, meaning I'm free to do the things that I want to do. We exchange commerce, money, or whatever for the goods and services that we exchange, because this is, so when I started my own situation, I don't deal in those because every contract can be broken, and that means lawyers get money.
That's right.
I'm not working to pay lawyers.
That's right.
Period.
That's
so
right.
Yeah, no, this is that I don't know if our African brothers and sisters did that, but yeah,
No, I mean, there was no infrastructure. In that meaning, there was no global. I mean, Howard French, I just saw he just left Lagos. He just gave a talk, and I think he's headed back to Madrid and coming back here, of course. And we it was good that we got in conversation with your brother when we did, because of course now the social structure is taking notice and that kind of thing. But we had different conversations with him. But yeah, I mean, that infrastructure wasn't. That's one of the points he makes in Born in Blackness. There was no African infrastructure that was continental. Now, yeah, the French were fighting, the English were fighting, the Portuguese and Spanish were fighting, but they had, whether it be the Catholic Church, whether it be the agreements they came up with, the Asientos, they had some form of loose coordination. The Dutch, there's no corresponding thing happening in 16th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century Africa. Just like here in where the two of us are right now in this global classroom, in what's called the United States, there was no continental consensus among the Aboriginals. Europe was able to do what it did in part because they knew when they embarked what the criminal enterprise was they were embarking on. They set upon people who did not have a similar network. Otherwise, we wouldn't be speaking English. No. If you say, how did they get? There wasn't a they. This is very important. I mean, when we get to the Africana Studies framework, when we get to framing question 2, after we finish part 1 and we begin part 2, we're going to look at that. The assumptions we make about who we are all off. It isn't what we know, it's what we know that ain't so, as Reggie Bryant would say. So there wasn't but now what we're seeing is with somebody like Deion Sanders, we're seeing the possibility of a we forming. And it scares the hell out of as folks are talking now, as you talking, Prof, and you mentioned those folks. I'm looking in the chat, and yeah, I mean, we can set aside Jerry Jones. We know why you were out there looking at these young kids who, simply want to continue the quality education they were getting at the black school, at the school with more resources. They weren't there because they liked you, Jerry. And we know your attitude toward black people. You love them until you don't. But then again,
I mean, we weren't planning on talking about this, but I've seen somebody out there trying to defend Jerry Jones for being.
You do that. What did you just say, Prof? They can take it away. They can take it away.
Well, you could say nothing unless did they reach out and say you have to say something.
Well, what's the agreement? You said that there's.
Say that. You better. I was sitting there. I was so disappointed because just like with our sanctuary, all of those people in that crowd, he wasn't just there watching. He wasn't just there. He was there because he was bought into a system that he thought that those black kids didn't deserve to be there, or he wouldn't have been there.
No question.
You wasn't just witnessing. You were there to intimidate them.
No
you
question.
were there, and your 90-year, I don't give a damn how old you are.
Yes.
60, 80 years can pass. You're still on a plantation being an overseer, or excuse me, worse, you're in a big house, boss. You are doing the same thing that your ancestors did, and this is who you are, which is why I can't support the NFL, no matter how much I love football or whatever. But the idea that you're supporting these owners of black people,
come on now,
running a ball, getting concussions, running for the Senate with half a brain, that you are out there supporting this system that doesn't support us at all. Put up a Rooney rule. This is how you know contracts are BS. There's a rule that states that you have to what? Interview, but you ain't got to hire. So given the choice, does Jerry Jones have a black coach?
Nope. That I know of. I mean, I don't know. I don't keep really track of the Dallas Cowboys.
Does he keep his savages in line? Does he, and if you step out of line, T.O. or anybody, do you get punished? Do you get the whip? Do you get the lash? I just feel like at some point we're going to have to decide some things.
Don't you think we're beginning to? Well,
we are, but not. We black people could cripple the NFL, which is the most successful sport league. Period.
No question.
Stop watching and buying the wearing the brands.
Well, they getting ready. I mean, and that's why they got to stop Deion Sanders at all costs.
Yes.
Because if they start going there, they don't mess with the NFL. But now you have decided you're gonna bring all the supply to you. It's the athletic equivalent of. And by the way, some cleanup stuff. And thank you all, because every week we talk about some of these things that have happened in the week between, as we put in history and some other things. And we don't get a chance to really dig deeper into some of the stuff we just kind of put out there. But of course, last 3 weeks ago, when the federal election was held in the United States, the midterm elections, and the legalizing cannabis referenda passed in Maryland, it did not pass in North and South Dakota, passed in Missouri, did not pass in Arkansas. Some of that it was attributed to white nationalism and but upon closer look, one of the things that happened in places like Arkansas is that those who supported legalizing cannabis urged people not to vote against legalizing cannabis under the language of the referendum, because unlike Maryland, unlike California, unlike some of these other states, New York, in fact, there's a long article in the New York Times about this the other day, those states passed referenda legalizing cannabis for personal consumption, whatever. And part of the referendum was the expungement of records for marijuana convictions. Those expungement, that expungement language was not in the referenda in North and South Dakota. It was not in the language of the Arkansas referenda. It was in the language of Missouri. So the people who were pushing to legalize cannabis said, vote for it in Maryland, vote for it in Missouri. What about Arkansas? Don't vote for it in Arkansas. Why? Because they didn't put expungement in. See, this is where the money hustle comes in, right? Because once you legalize it, Like there are set asides, not large enough. It's reading, like I said, the article in the Times, Maryland, California. There are set asides for people who had prior convictions. They aren't nearly as extensive as they need to be. But if you've been convicted before of possession or possession with intent to distribute, I mean, you're doing basically hand-to-hand herb hustling, as Busta Rhymes used to call it. You know, if you can get your money together, you can apply for a license. Now, that's the money they get. That's the back end where they mess you up on it. But I'm saying all that to say that these pushbacks are about the money. And I'm saying it in the context of what we're talking about now with sports, in particular college sports, in particular football, revenue generating sport at the college level, and Deion Sanders, because Deion Sanders represents a threat. The threat is you're going to cut off the slave labor at the source. See, no, look, there was a time, certainly during apartheid in this country, where James Shack Harris, Ed Too Tall Jones, Doug Williams, Walter Payton, the NFL didn't care that you went to Jackson State or Tennessee State or Grambling or Southern. They didn't care that Jerry Rice graduated from Mississippi Valley State University. Now, they didn't take Willie Totten, Satellite Totten, who, as far as I'm concerned, is the best quarterback ever to throw a ball to Jerry Rice. Joe Montana, hell, you can go over there with the rest of them people, because I, with my own eyes at the Indianapolis Circle City Classic, saw Jerry Rice and Willie Totten hang damn near a 70 spot on my team. Willie Satellite Totten was no joke, but he had to go to Canada because he came about 15 minutes after a cat named Warren Moon, who had to go to Canada. And he came about 15 seconds after Jefferson Street Joe Gilliam, who should have been the quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he ended up having to go to Canada. That's where you had to go if you want to play quarterback. So they didn't draft Totten out of Mississippi Valley, but they took the receiver, and he's in the Hall of Fame. The NFL didn't care about that position, and now care less about where you went to school either, but you're about to mess up the money. I forget where that racist Jerry Jones went, Oklahoma or somewhere. And I understand if you got to defend Jerry Jones because your master requires it. You that little dog at the RCA, listening to your master's voice. You got to do that because, as you said, Prof, once they pull you in, then they can take things away. And if they start taking things away after you've gotten used to them, you'll come running to your master saying, "What must I do to be saved?" And so, well, this is what you're going to have. In fact, we're not even going to tell you what to do because it would look too unseemly. We're just going to sit back and see what you do. And you know what your master wants you to do. Jump out in front of him and take the bullet. But here's the problem. I don't care what Kanye said or Kyrie said or anybody else. In the context of the social structure, what we've begun to see, again, this thing goes through rhythms. Regardless of whatever argument we're going to have with these brothers in a governance formation, you trying to cut their throats, which means you're trying to cut our throats, which means we all agree on this. We against you. Now, whatever we're going to have this conversation, we'll have that too, publicly or privately. But we can all agree on this. Your interests and our interests ain't the same. So, Stephen A., brother, you can't say that, man. Because in social media, they're already putting together the list of 5 to 10 things he must do before he can be saved. Why? Because they're not doing it expecting him to do it. They're doing it because they clowning what the white boys tried to do to Kyrie. So Jerry Jones, in order for you to be reinstated, you must, and when you start seeing things like that, what your understanding is that is a dimension of the we that forms in something that is ultimately unsustainable. In other words, opposition to the social structure that we find ourselves in when it oppresses us, that's unsustainable. We should not ever build identities based on who we are not. However, it is a useful nudge toward the conversations that we're having here, because the we're having here conversations become, we get over in Nubia one night, we can talk about the Hebrew Israelites, their origins, where they're getting their stuff from, the arguments they have within each other. There's probably some Hebrew Israelites in here right now. But guess what? That's a governance conversation. It's not cancel culture. It's not condemnation. It's not. But what is happening, as we see with the Deion Sanders situation, I think is two things. And then we kind of tie this into where we're going on Indigenous Peoples Day weekend. And that is two things. Number one, his son is there. His family's in Jackson. He got his sons there, It could be that he stays till Shakur graduate. Shadur, is that he said? Not Shakur, Shadur. It could be. And name, image, and likeness is a factor that wasn't here before. Meaning what? You can now have your personal brand as a player, and that goes wherever you want. I think the brand of Jackson State may be on the verge of being a little stronger than the brand of Ole Miss. Ole Miss. I'm watching people, black people, who, with all due respect, might not be able to find the campus of Jackson State if they flew into Mega Wiley Evers Airport in Jackson, Mississippi. And Jackson ain't that big, but they ordering Jackson State gear. And I love how the HBCUs put an extra E on the word E on the art on the word the on the article the, because everybody does it. The THEE, right? The Jackson State University, the Howard University, the Tennessee State University. I love it. But that the is not a misspelling. That's a gloss. That's cultural meaning making. We sticking it on. And in a couple of weeks, I think it's the weekend of the 16th, 17th of December, when Jackson State meets up with North Carolina Central in Atlanta at the Celebration Bowl. Does anybody believe it's not going to be sold out? Because Jackson State University this year led the division, FCS, in attendance. Now, I went to one of them schools where the white boys tried to break us and put us in, some Negro bourgeois lackeys who, some who were ancestors and whose names I won't even dignify by repeating, under pressure from their masters, joined the Ohio Valley Conference. That would be Tennessee State, which was an independent. Tennessee State, in the historically black college annals of college football, was in our governance formations behind the apartheid curtain, kind of similar to Notre Dame before it had a conference affiliation. They were independent. So Tennessee State could play anybody in the black college world. And so they did. But then they pushed Tennessee State into the Ohio Valley Conference in the late 1980s. We protested like hell. I was student body president that year, 1986-87, the commissioner of the OVC, who ended up being the commissioner of the Big Ten, Jim Delaney. I might as well name these people. No, I'm going to stop. Pause. Good speech. I can see Jacob Carruthers in my head. Good speech. Let me keep focused. The first athletic director at Tennessee State who advocated to join the Ohio Valley Conference is the one name I will mention, Gale Sayers. Now, y'all know they loved Gale Sayers. He was no Herschel Walker in terms of his, but Gale Sayers, who's an ancestor. I Am Third. You remember the book, the movie. Gale Sayers, Chicago Bears. It made him athletic director at Tennessee State in part, so he could be the one to usher us into the Ohio Valley Conference. And here's what would happen. Tennessee State football team would go to play one of the great powers of the South. I don't know, the University of Tennessee at Martin, Austin Peay. Those huge, athletic schools. Anyway, we show up with the aristocratic band coming in 150, 200 deep, with the black people going to, and we all pay tickets to go in to the game. The band show up. On the other side, their fans are there. Oh, a shower in the land of cotton. And the band marching all stiff. And they ain't never seen nothing like Tennessee State, traveling roadshow. Then it come time for Austin Peay to come to Nashville to play, or UT Martin, or whoever else, Eastern Illinois, to come to Nashville. They fans not coming. We don't get that money. We knew that was going to happen. Jackson State traveling, playing these black schools, the stadiums are full. And I saw in the chat, y'all talking smack. I love the set tripping. I believe there's only one HBCU with a lot of different locations, but when it come down to having to pick sides, the ones we went to, we start putting our tribal colors on and get it in, all in good fun. Yes, they put an ass whooping on Florida A&M. And in the social structure, the people who picked the playoffs, the football championship series subdivision playoffs, did not select Florida A&M to be in the playoffs because they only lost a couple of times. And one of them was Jackson State. Well, they also didn't win the MEAC. North Carolina Central won the MEAC. So Central is going to be playing Jackson State in Atlanta in a couple of weeks at the Celebration Bowl. Some of you all in here right now are preparing a little bit later this afternoon. If you're watching this on a Saturday, if you're watching it on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, it's already happened. But we all know if you live in the governance formation, all the fam out there who are worldwide, who are all over in the UK and in the continent, in other places in Europe, who are in Latin America, the Caribbean, you may or may not know that this so-called Thanksgiving Day in the United States, this white nationalist so-called holiday, which we call Indigenous Peoples now weekend, day and weekend. Indigenous Peoples weekend was yesterday, and then the weekend we just keep it going. I'm gonna talk more about that in a minute. You might not know that this is the annual pause. For those of you who don't follow sports like this, Professor Hunter can walk through this better than I could. I'm just gonna do it very quickly. Every year, there's a college football playoff. In the playoffs, what they used to call 1AA as opposed to 1A. 1A is the real slave football factories: Ohio State University, Michigan, University of Alabama, Georgia, this kind of Texas. They just now have a playoff system with a limited number. In what they used to call 1AA, now the football subdivision, FCS, they have a playoff that involves maybe, I don't know, a dozen schools. I don't know how many, 16 schools. It's usually based on rankings. Florida A&M wasn't picked. But here's why Jackson State is not in the FCS playoffs. This is why Grambling and Southern can never be in the FCS playoffs. This is why South Carolina State can't be in the FCS playoffs. 2 reasons. Number 2, I mentioned, in Atlanta, they have the HBCU National Championship. So them FCS playoffs y'all go do y'all little thing. Who are you playing? I'm in Iceberg State University. I'm playing Prairie Grass University for the FCS play. Nobody wants to see that shit. Boise State, North Dakota, whatever. We're playing a game in Atlanta where the game is kind of incidental. Although Deion, I'm trying to bring that back. It's the band. It's going to Atlanta for the weekend. I mean, it's the whole thing. But that's number 2. Number 1, fam, global fam, there are a bunch of Africans as we speak, hungover from last night, probably been there since they left their mama table Thanksgiving night, and will be there through Sunday or maybe Monday in New Orleans. Because it's the Bayou Classic. Weekend. That's always Thanksgiving. Them Negroes from Grambling and Southern are all masked up in Louisiana having the time of their lives. And that is called the Bayou Classic. You got to understand. And some of y'all, in fact, I should look in the chat now. Let me pull this up and see. Prof, have you ever been to the Bayou Classic? I don't know if you've ever been. I've never been. I would love to go one day. The Bayou Classic been going on since on Armistice Day, 1932. The Southern University Bushmen. Yeah, I said it right. The Bushmen. In fact, go get Thomas Leo's book called Bayou Classic, the rivalry between Grambling and Southern, except they weren't called Grambling and Southern the same way we call them. 1932 Armistice Day, there was a game where the Southern University Bushmen, my God, Bushmen, traveled to northern Louisiana to take on the Louisiana Normal and Industrial Institute, then a 2-year school that would eventually become known as Grambling State University. Since 1932, they've been playing the Bayou Classic. They don't miss the Bayou Classic. So when approached many years, when mostly Grambling, but also Southern, was ranked in the national 1AA, now FCS football, it's okay, well, you might as well not invite them. Why? Because the FCS playoffs takes place now. We can't come to the FCS playoffs. Why? That's a very nice social structure thing. And we would like to win a national championship. Florida A&M won a national championship one year. So like 1978, I think Rudy Hubbard and them won it. But at any rate, some of y'all know in the chat, Nubians. But we can't go. Why? It's a Bayou Classic. We don't miss the Bayou Classic. Grambling gonna play Southern from now until the earth blow up from the sun exploding in supernova in New Orleans this weekend. And the Celebration Bowl has taken on a gloss. It's probably going to be sold out. So these people looking at Deion, that was number 1, this kind of move toward these black spaces. And you're only helping it by trying to, in the words that my brother Nick Cannon used, buck break black women and men if they get out of line and let whole white nationalists like Jerry Jones get a pass. That's no problem. We know who you are. See, the problem is you don't think we know who you are. We know who you are. We ain't mad. We ain't got no smoke for y'all. We just be clowning y'all. Now, one of us run out having heard his master's voice and try to get in front of his master. We're going to give you some smoke, bro. It's going to be some governance structure smoke. And you have to claw back your credibility if you can, because, you know, people kind of predict like clockwork when you're going to jump out in front of your master. But at any rate, the point is that We understand that you're making it easier for us to have space to come up with a we. Although we can't base the we on who we are not, it certainly is a strong push toward the conversations we need to have, which is how we build with each other. This is why I'm going to bring it now into Indigenous Peoples Day. But the second thing of the two I wanted to say is not only that push thing where we're seeing this kind of resurgence, black kids going to black colleges, thinking about black colleges. And I saw in the chat a couple of people talked about North Carolina A&T and Tennessee State. I'm going to talk about that too in a minute. But the most important thing is, if you think Deion Sanders stalking the sidelines at one of your white slave plantation style athletics football factories is going to bring the magic of an HBCU to their school, you're wrong. I don't even think they think that. I think they're trying to make sure that they don't put down they can try to put down a whole slave rebellion by people going to HBCUs. And I think they like Deion Sanders because he's entertaining. And if we know nothing else, we know that Africans entertaining enslavers is a staple of colonialism, a staple of settler colonialism. As Fred Douglass said in 1852, what to the slave is the 4th of July. They who carried us off captive required of us a song. But you got to continue in that Bible verse because Douglass then says, how can we sing our song in a strange land? What you're going to find out is Deion Sanders can't sing that song on the sidelines in Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma. He can't sing that song on the sidelines of the slave economic concern, which you won't let him go to immediately. If he stays in Jackson State another 2 or 3 years, then the big boys start calling. Why? Because you about to mess up. Now it isn't just Jackson State with those players, it's Prairie View with those players. It's Grambling and Southern with those players again. Because it's not like we don't have players, but it's like now people start and if you keep messing around holding people hostage and telling them they got to say Mother May I 50 times and give me $50 million at your contract, ain't nobody gonna play for your funky teams. But at any rate, that's one thing. But how can we sing our song in a strange land, as Fred Douglass asks? You understand that if Deion Sanders comes and coaches your team, he's not bringing the band, he's not bringing the professors, he's not bringing the alumni, he's not bringing the cheerleaders. You don't want none of that. You just want him for entertainment purposes and to kneecap what you think you can kneecap, what you can't. The magic don't transfer, baby. The magic don't transfer. And I'm going to tell you, as somebody like many of us in this space who went to and work at black colleges. See, it's one thing to go there to play sports. It's nothing to come on campus, look around in August, September, and see all those beautiful black young women and men. See, you can't do that at Ohio State. I went to Ohio State too. I know what y'all greet the black recruits with at the front of the school. I know where you take them on Saturday night. I know what parties you take them to. How do I know? Because my friends, my former students, were those athletes. So we know, Professor Hunter, you know where they take them. Well, guess what? That's a very different conversation when you run it up in a frat house at Ohio State or Michigan or Iowa or University of Southern California. Yeah, you got a little dance team over here. It's very cute, but it's another thing when you run up in the fraternity house, the sorority house at 2 o'clock in the morning, and somehow you twisted your knee and you can't play. Like a brother who was the quarterback at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, about 30 years ago, who messed up his knee or something. Robinson, I think, was his name. Black quarter. UT like have little quarterbacks. In fact, they had a quarterback won a national championship. What's his name? His brother played for the Giants. Peyton Manning. Wait, no, Peyton Manning never won a championship for the University of Tennessee. No, it was T. Martin, the black quarterback. But they ain't named the street in front of the stadium, Neyland Stadium in racist UT Knoxville for him. They named it for Manning, who never won nothing at the University of Tennessee. But at any rate, when the man messed up his knee, all of a sudden, he gets in trouble at the University of Tennessee. Well, if you're at Jackson State, if you're at Grambling or Southern, if you're at Tennessee State or Florida A&M, if you are at Howard University or Grambling, as I said, or at North Carolina A&T, you got a different conversation going on. The magic doesn't transfer. And so I'm hoping and expecting that at some point, we will be able to regain our footing in this rhythm, this dance between plantation style college athletics, HBCU, historically plantation colleges and universities, and maroon style college athletics. Historically, maroon colleges and universities. Maroons as in runaways, them escaped Negroes, them governance structured Negroes. We call them HBCUs, black colleges and universities. That pendulum seems to be swinging back. And I don't even know if Coach Prime can stop the magic from forming at this point. I know his players, some of them might transfer if he goes somewhere else, but a bunch of them going to be like, I ain't leaving this campus. Have you lost your mind? Have you seen the people who are down here at this campus? Some of you know what I'm talking about. So let's talk about this in the context of creating a we. Because this question that drives this whole thing is, can there be a we when we start talking about African people? And out of what do we create a we? Can we create a we? It's not enough to be against something. Ultimately, what you just heard Professor Karen Hunter say, you got to center the before. What happens when the before was not a we, but a place with a lot of we's? And then we went through an experience which created a we in large measure around two things, as we talk about in the Africana Studies framework: opposing oppression, which is one way to create identity, blackness in a way, and looking at each other and saying these things are different between us, but we will make an alliance, and these things are very similar or virtually the same. We'll create an identity. That's the we. And for that, we're going to kind of turn toward, for the last few minutes together on this Indigenous Peoples Day weekend, our kin, our First Nations kin, the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. I think about this in the context of Africans who are from the continent of Africa, or from places where African people are the majority: Haiti, Jamaica, Trinidad, Tobago, you name it, all the countries in Africa. Yes, including the Maghreb, because even though those areas look a little different, they're still from the continent. I'm not talking about if you came out of your mother's womb on the continent. Shout out to Elon Musk. Chef's kiss racist. Ain't talking about you. Talking about the Africans. And no, you're not an African. We're not talking geography now, not exclusively. We're talking about the combination of geography and culture. And for that, you're disqualified. The indigenous people of any place are not just from that physical place. They are from an unbroken genealogy of cultural meaning making. That's why Giannis Antetokounmpo, his brothers, his father and mother, his family are not Greek. They could be born in Greece, but they are not Greek. They are Greek. They could be Greek citizens, which you finally gave him after he got famous, and you shame. But what about the rest of them Africans up there? Well, if you can kick a soccer ball, maybe we'll let you play for the German national team. Or, and in that moment, maybe you'll be like Brill and Bolo if you play for Sweden. You'll score the goal that lets your lily white nation, country, which is closer to a nation, kind of homogenous culturally, continue in the World Cup, but you ain't celebrating because you Cameroonian. And even Cameroon is a gloss, a label, a flag, some lines, because if you dig beneath Cameroon, what are you? He's going to tell you he's some mother's son. And he's going to tell you the languages he speaks. And those languages, those first languages, are African languages. And it's very important to understand then that geography is only one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is, what is your cultural genealogy? What is your language? What is your memory? What is the connections that ground you? So no, Elon Musk, you Afrikaner, whatever you are, you're not an African. You just happen to be born there. As Malcolm X said, if a cat has kittens in the oven, they don't make the kittens biscuits. I wrote a whole article for it by man James Conyers many years ago. I think 2006, 2007, in a reader he did on Malcolm X. James Conyers. The name of the article was "You Don't Call the Kittens Biscuits." Malcolm X and the theorization of Africana Studies, one of the roots of the conceptual categories framework. So let's get into this by using the indigenous people, because the people of Africa are indigenous to the continent of Africa. Well, the people of the Western Hemisphere who are indigenous to this continent, North America, Latin America, Caribbean America, South America, so to speak, the whole hemisphere. Well, those people are in mourning this week. They were in mourning on Thursday, so-called Thanksgiving, you see. And if I'm in this area, I try to get down to the National Museum of the American Indian on Thanksgiving, so-called Thanksgiving holiday. And I go spend some time in that museum. I love that museum. That museum is a museum that gestures toward, evokes, is in dialogue with the human beings of the Western Hemisphere, not just of the United States, the indigenous people of the hemisphere. It makes it different. And it's a beautiful thing. I'm a shout out to all those people down there. And I was down there on Thursday. I always go to the bookstore. And this is a beautiful children's book. Kipunumuk. Kipunumuk. Wiachumun's Thanksgiving Story. This is a very interesting little children's book. It was written by Danielle Greendeer, who is a citizen of the Mashpee Wampanoag Nation, works in indigenous arts, cultural perpetuation, and food sovereignty. She lives in Mashpee, Massachusetts. Anthony Perry, who is a Chickasaw citizen and author of Chula the Fox, an award-winning middle grade historical fiction book. He lives in London, England. We're going to start talking about the we. You understand? I've already named 2 different nations of people. Let's put 2 more nations in. Alexis Bunton worked on this book. She is Yupik and Yuangan. She authored the award-winning nonfiction book, So How Long Have You Been Native? Life as an Alaska Native Tour Guide. She lives in Monterey, California. By the way, an indigenous woman just won election to the federal legislature, United States Congress. They called the election for her. She's the one who beat Sarah Palin in the special election. She's won a full 2-year term as a congressperson. She'll be coming to D.C. She isn't already here. And finally, the illustrator, Gary Meaches Sr., he's Anishinaabe. He's born on the Long Plains Reserve in southern Manitoba, Canada. His style is reminiscent of the Plains style of art and evokes the Eastern Woodlands tradition. He lives in Connecticut, and this is his first picture book. They tell the story of the first so-called Thanksgiving, but they tell it from the people. Wiachwanun, that means corn. Here, Kipun Unmuk, that means harvest. 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 Corn's Thanksgiving story. Corn? Yeah, because they start with indigenous ways of knowing. The Wampanoag were the first peoples who these invaders called pilgrims encountered. In fact, let me just read this. It's called Before You Begin. In other words, you're a child. I'm going to read this. You're an adult. You're a parent. Want to get this book? These indigenous people say, before you begin, this is the tale of the harvest feast shared by the newcomers and the Wampanoag people in 1621. The newcomers arrived in what is now Plymouth, Massachusetts, and colonized the ancestral homeland of the Wampanoag tribes. At the time of the first Thanksgiving, many tribes lived in the same area. They are often known as Indians or Native Americans. Gotta love. See, this is what happened when you start at the beginning, yo. In this story, we call them first peoples. So what they do, they started with the name of the people, Wampanoag. Then they said, this is what the social structure called them, Indians or Native Americans. Then they said, from our governance formation, we're going to use language, but we're not going to take it from the social structure, but we will make a bridge so we can have this conversation. In this story, we'll call them first peoples. That ain't what they would have called themselves. We told you what they call themselves, and we told you what you call them. But we don't call them this because we're going to let y'all read this together. We call them first peoples because they were the first to live on this land. The Wampanoag people had taken care of their land and tended their gardens for at least 12,000 years. Karen Hunter said, center the beginning. 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 From slavery. From slavery? Are you serious right now? Anyway, no problem. Great scholars, great people, but as John Clark said, if you start your history with slavery, everything since then looks like progress. No wonder you celebrate Barack Obama, because that's the first Negro to give a speech. You've been talking since vocal cords. Center the beginning. Let's continue. The Wampanoag people hunt, fish, and raise the 3 sisters. The 3 sisters. Who are the 3 sisters? Corn. That's Wichamanuun. Corn, beans, and squash. Over time, first peoples developed deep knowledge about the ways that many plants, often called medicine, help bodies and minds stay healthy. Then they put a glossary. You're going to learn some of our language here. Ways of knowing. Language is a way of knowing. Language carries culture. So if you're a 5-year-old reading this book, or if you're a 35-year-old reading to your daughter or son, let's get some words down, and we're going to let you pronounce them. Hipunchumu, time of harvest. Go down to the bottom. Wiachumu, corn. Wampanoag, a First Peoples tribe, means people of the first light. Pilgrim. Now, I'm going to pause here. I'm going to come back to the book. What happens when the we's collide? We got to understand, this is a mourning weekend for the indigenous people. We're going to come back to the book in a minute. What happens when you can't escape a social structure that pulls you in and then wants to rename you for its purposes? That is the battleground called education. That's what schooling is for. You know, there's a new exhibit at a newer exhibit at the National Museum of the American Indian called, they just dedicated this there 2 years ago, but it was during COVID, so they just had the dedication a couple of weeks ago. I was talking to the staff when I was down there Thursday, stayed there and had a beautiful conversation, just listening to them talk about this. They're editing the footage. Some of it is up on the Smithsonian website. If you look, this is the commemorative book for the National Native American Veterans Memorial, National Museum of the American Indian. This is on the grounds of the NMAI. It's a beautiful, beautiful exhibit. Beautiful memorial. So we ask ourselves, why in the hell, if you're Native American, would you join the military? Why is this sister there? Now you got to love it, right? This is a collision of social structure and governance. And the governance in her is represented in ways of knowing, science, technology, movement and memory, cultural meaning making. She is in military dress. She got this old raggedy ass flag over here, but what's in her hair? You see that, fella? Come on now. The title of this book, which was published in another form, and I had this book in the other form, but I wanted this one because this is a commemorative volume. Why We Serve, Native Americans in the United States Armed Forces. And there's a companion exhibit, which is just very beautiful. This was published 2 years ago. Every page has got artwork. Then they do these long essays. Terry Greaves, who is Kiowa, did a piece called Prayer Blanket. Why do we serve? That blanket says it all. We defended ourselves before y'all came. And if making sure the Germans don't get over here and mess with us means I got to get a rifle and join your army, and I got to give you battle strategies to help us beat them, like the Navajo code talkers, then I'll do that. Why? I'm defending my territory. That's what the Native American veterans I've talked to, or more importantly, listened to, have always said to me. It's a consistent answer. And this is an excellent volume because it goes through cultures of war. I love how they start this volume. Cultures of war, they talk about, in fact, let me just show you a few pictures of these cats in the military. This is the Alaska Territorial Guard. They were recruited, women, men, children, to flank during World War II. In case Japanese came over and sent these balloons over, surveillance balloons, whatever they were doing, they said, now we got to protect that. Now we can debate and talk about the wars, but these people defending their homeland, not the flag of the United States. Give me the flag if it means I get the gun with it, and the uniform, no problem if it means if I get the gun with it. And I'm going to defend, because they not coming taking my land. In fact, if I'd had this when you came, I wouldn't be speaking English, but we got to compromise. I'm a first person. Actually, I'm Navajo. I'm Lakota. Yeah. I'm Comanche. But, first person's fine if you give me the gun. Flag, whatever. Yeah, okay, it's very nice. But there are cultures. You go to Navajo code talkers. Y'all don't understand what we saying. You never did. Now you want us to talk to each other, huh? And to teach you. Oh, man. My man, Dan Walpoose, who is Mimini, the Navy took this picture and says it all. Boy, if they had these at Little Bighorn. Now, of course, there's a great exhibit on the third floor of the National Museum of the American Indian called Americans, where it talks about how indigenous people are all through this old made-up ass culture called American culture. They name all the Apache helicopter. They name all this stuff they name for Native Americans, right? But here, Alexander Harris wrote an excellent piece called Cultures of War, where they talk about the warrior tradition among indigenous people. It says what? The warrior tradition. Few concepts have had such an overarching impact on the experiences and identity of Native peoples in the United States. In many ways, and for many indigenous cultures, traditions concerning war have been intrinsic to daily life for many generations. Beyond fighting, warriors cared for their community and helped in times of difficulty. They did what was necessary to ensure their people's survival, including laying down their lives. These traditions are not a simplified, monolithic warrior trope. In other words, don't compare this with Thor and all them white boys and the Norsemen and all that stuff y'all was doing over there, William the Conqueror. Don't compare this to Braveheart. No. Goes on and says these traditions are not a simplified monolithic warrior trope, however, but complex and diverse systems integrated with the rest of indigenous worldviews and values of their times. Tribal traditions, for war or otherwise, are not static, but have evolved over time, right? Adapting to changing lifeways and circumstances. Indigenous practices, social, spiritual, and tactical, surrounding war have both changed and endured over the course of history. And then they go through the whole question of culture. You can't reduce the cultures of thousands of different groups in a whole hemisphere to a one book, but you can evoke the fact that you can't and then ground it somewhere else. Karen Hunter just told us, center the before. And then you can go through the wars of the United States. Promise it. Look at this next chapter. The Promise and Peril of Alliance, from Contact to 1814. First of all, y'all liars, and the truth ain't in you. I picked up another book while I was there. I didn't have a copy of this one. This is Chief Seattle and the town that took his name, how they lied to Chief Seattle and the Nez Perce folk. And by the way, if y'all go online, you'll see why we serve. It's not this book. This book is more expensive. While we serve, you can get kind of cheaply. You can get cheaper even more. This is the National Native American Veterans Memorial Souvenir Book. You can get it from the National Museum of the American Indian, and some of what's talked about in here is in a much reduced section, but it's important. And I mention this because all of these treaties they broke. So they start with who they are to each other. Then they go through the encounter with the social structure, and then they talk about the next chapter, the Indian Civil War, choosing sides. Africans sold Africans into slavery. Slow your roll. There is a colonizing presence here. There's a colonial presence here, and we got to make some decisions because our first obligation is to each other and ourselves. If there's no overarching we, the we's form around family and community. This is what we've been talking about when we started talking about the governance structure, when we finished last Monday, and then on this Monday we're starting Ways of Knowing in the Africana Studies class in Nubia, but we talked for 2 weeks about governance, who we are to each other, that we shrinks depending on what's surrounding it. And so they don't shy away from the conflicts, which are engendered in principal part during settler colonialism by external factors. When we say black people sold black people into slavery, first of all, they weren't black. There's no such thing as black. That is a phrase that came from what's the first thing. Start at the beginning now. Center the before. The people you're talking about weren't one people. And the external factor is what beset this thing and set this kind of attack on point to this day. And then we sit up and surrender our children to schools where they backmap this foolishness, because they begin, and by they I mean Europe, I mean whiteness, they centered there before, which is why your children can tell you everything about Beowulf, Canterbury Tales, William Shakespeare, tell you about the Queen of England and all that, and can't tell you one damn thing about their great-grandparents. They were some from down south, or what their ancestors were doing when the Queen of England rose up out of her 2-time-a-year bath. Anyway, we're going to stop. Indian Wars, Indian Scouts, Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, War and Peace, conflicts in the Middle East, honoring the legacy of service. Then they come down through. Why are you fighting? You invaded my homeland, and now, and while I'm fighting you, liar, I'm going to get these guns and keep these other people out of it before I got to fight them too. It's not that hard, but it's also very complicated. I brought it up to say that you're not going to get this history in school. None of us did. The fear is that ultimately the place where many people who are in this room right now live, the United States of America, which is not a nation. I'll say that until the day I draw my last breath, and then from the ancestral realm. Our nation. Who is us? Who is we? There ain't no our nation. No, there's no our nation. What there is a social structure organized around the nation state, organized around artificial boundaries and the concept of citizenship, which is many ways anti-community. And once you've drawn that, there's exclusion, inclusion and exclusion, and legal enforcement of exclusion and inclusion. Now, how do you keep it together? You keep trying to make a we by forcing people into a narrative which is not in pursuit of truth, but in pursuit of a we that you can continue to exploit. What do I mean by that? There is a National Museum of the American Indian in the United States of America. American Indian, not a phrase they would have used. But we here now. So what us gonna do? Well, there are we's in the Indigenous America, like there are we's on the continent of Africa. And those we's, out of those we's can be generated at least a momentum for a larger set of we's that doesn't rely on what we are not. I hate that Southern University in 1932, when they played the first Bayou Classic, called themselves the Bushmen. But you know why they were called the Bushmen? Because them Europeans in this country, whether it be Jerry, white nationalists, defenders notwithstanding, Jones, or anybody else, you're a Bushman. And a Bushman was considered an insult. It's like the N-word, the Bushman. The Bushman, the Hottentots. That's not what they call themselves. Why you say Hottentot? Because you can't say Casa. And because you can't say Casa, you just start making click sounds like they make, and then it came in Hottentot. Bushman? Why, it's the bush. Really? You want to talk about the bush? Let's go, where were you from? Where's your bathroom, man? Did y'all bathe this month? Yeah, we go to the river, and yeah, there's bush there, but your bush, clearly you're not using it. It's cold up here. I get why. I mean, no shade, no judgment. But what you're not gonna do is make me somehow different because I'm different. Rank humanity, put yourself at the center and me on the periphery. So the Southern University, it was called the Bushmen in 1932. My God. However, in 2022, when you come to the United States, they got a national story they want you to adopt. And that is the battleground of education. We're going to start winding this to a close now with these hillbillies in Tennessee and North Carolina and these HBCUs that they want to get into line. You go into any immigration and nationalization office, and they can give you a set of these in a lot of languages. This is the one in Spanish, right? This is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services flashcards for you taking the citizenship test, which you can take in your native language. A lot of people took it in Spanish. I like these cards because they remind you that there is no we.
Wait, Doc, but speak English. Isn't that our national language?
But see, Prof, this is a great question you're asking. Is it important whether you speak English or not? Absolutely, to a white nationalist. Is it more important than what story you tell with your indigenous language? Never. So these white nationalists, the MAGA people, or as I don't know, whatever that adjective that Biden and them put on it, they are caught up in the language. Meanwhile, the true architects of white nationalism understand that if you put it in Spanish, you can tell the same lie. The same lie, just in Spanish. Let's look at it. What is the supreme law of the nation? En la Constitution. Okay. What is the Constitution? Well, the Constitution establishes the government, establishes the rights, establishes your civil. Okay, very good. Who are the people for whom the Constitution is for? Nosotros, el pueblo. We the people. So it's in Spanish, but what are the amendments? Well, we got these amendments here. Okay, it's very nice. Where do your rights come from? They come from the Bill of Rights. See, they telling the narrative, and so Spanish don't matter. It's what are your freedoms? Oh, we got freedom of expression, religion, assembly. Okay, you don't see privacy there, do you? No, because that racist Samuel Alito and his buddy Clarence Thomas kicked the teeth out of that. How many amendments are there? Now watch these Latinos who amended the Constitution. They're 27. See these two Latinos? Wait, they aren't Latinos. Oh, that's Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. It don't matter if it's English or Spanish. Well, what is the Declaration of Independence? And there go your master. Not now one of them indigenous. See, you can talk about, he's George Washington, you're not my dad. To take the test to be a citizen, that's my dad. Now I'm not gonna go through all these because there are probably 100. No, actually there are 100 of them right on the dot. But I'm gonna stop at a couple so you can get a sense of what let me see here. Let me see. Let's talk about a couple. Let's go to card number 32.
Where'd you get these cards, Doc?
You can get it at any U.S. citizen. Anybody can get them. U.S. Citizenship Immigration Service. Walk in and walk in them. You can get them in Chinese. You can get them in Korean. I took the ones in Spanish because it helped me brush up on my Spanish a little bit till I get some time to really get down in the language. I mean, coming to deal with people. And it's a great example when people try to tell you some lie like, oh, you know, we're multicultural. You're not multicultural. You gave this in the language of the colonizer, by the way, because that ain't the language of Latin America. It's not Spanish. Spanish is a colonial language too. You see the young man who's playing Immortal in Black Panther. He been making that case all along. It's a damn shame, he say, that you got African people in the United States who made a movie, got the license to make a movie, and they've done more for indigenous people in Spanish-speaking popular culture in movies than any of the Spanish-speaking people in Hollywood. Because when they say Latino, they mean white Latino. No shade, just saying. Them the darkest indigenous people you ever seen in the history of Hollywood in one movie, Black Panther, because there's a gloss of solidarity there. So let me not go. Oh wait, here goes one of my favorites. Here's one of my favorites here, if I can find it. Yeah, here we go. This is number 91. What is the number of territories in the United States? Here go the colonies: Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Samoa. Well, they left off DC. Again, the narrative, very important. Oh man, I could go through. They got one Martin Luther King, the capital of the United States. Oh, look, watch this. Here go the settler colonial. Why are there 13 stripes on the bandera, on the flag? Because they represent the 13 colonies. They even put the colonialism in. You got to take the test now. If you take it in Spanish, that's great. And the hillbillies going to rage and say they racist. But at the end of the day, I won't even go through it. They got Martin Luther King. But it's mostly white narrative. You said it yourself, Prof, at the beginning. Why are you identifying these facts? Because you're trying to tell a story. And if you're going to put your hand up and get to stay here, as opposed to us stopping you at the border that we made up anyway, that we crossed you at the border, and people running to get that last minute cranberry sauce or head of cabbage or whatever they got at the store, realizing that people who speak Spanish picked most of that stuff for slave wages, and that's how it got to your table later. But hey, let's all give thanks. The indigenous people now got to take a test to live somewhere that they were before the people came. Now, let me finish with the children's book, and then I'm going to finish with the Tennessee and North Carolina thing. I thought maybe we could read this book together, but the thing I love about this book, the children are out with their grandmother, and the little girl Maple says, "I love your garden this time of year," said Maple. Oh, by the way, I should show you all. Maple and Quill, the children in this, they based on real life people. I love this little book. Meet Maple and Quill. The real Maple and Quill are Mashpee Wampanoag kids who live in Mashpee, Massachusetts. In this photo, Maple is 4, Quill is 2, and baby Tulsi is 12 months old. Maple likes to pick flowers with her mom. Quill likes to fish with his dad. They both love to spend time listening to their grandmother, Nokomis, tell them Wampanoag stories. You ain't got to beat people over the head. Who are we to each other? We want everybody to buy this book on Thanksgiving. And let us tell you about Thanksgiving. This book here, the animals talk to them. Witcher Moon stretched her weary ears toward the sky. Who are these new people? Remember, Witcher Moon mean corn. The 3 sisters, beans, corn, squash. Are they people? They are spirits, every living thing. Ways of knowing. You want a children's book for African people? We were not born on the water. 2 winters have passed since many of the first peoples who cared for Witcher Moon passed on to the spirit world. Those who were not taken by sickness found new homes to ease their heavy hearts and rebuild their lives. Witcher Moon feared this winter would be her last. Corn called upon Fox for help. Fox looked up at Witcher Moon. Should we trust these newcomers, he asked? Stay close and watch what they do. Corn telling the Fox, these white people, I'm scared. Why? Because they don't know what they're doing. You see, in Wampanoag, you plant the three sisters together and they nourish each other and the soil, and you don't have to keep burning stuff and the soil don't go fallow. That's how you farm. Europe, clear off all the land, burn shit, and just plant this here, plant this here, plant this here. They looking like, what the hell science and technology is that? That is what you do when you don't know what you're doing. Corn is nervous. So Corn talked to Fox. Fox said, should we trust him? Corn said, just watch him. So fall turns to winter. Wichimung and the other plants fell asleep. Fox watched the newcomers come ashore. He watched as they made their way into the forest. He watched them enter an abandoned Wetu village. He watched them take a cooking pot and a basket of Wichimung seeds. Don't take us away, the seeds cried. We're waiting for the first peoples to come back in the spring to prepare our beds. We must grow first. But the newcomers could not hear the seeds. Their ears did not know the voices of the land. Now here they are now having torn up the whole damn world talking about renewable energy and sustainable energy and clean energy. You wouldn't even have to do that if you could have heard the voices of the land. We'd have a different kind of technology. And no, I'm not talking about an Afro-futuristic Wakanda, which is not real. I'm talking about the literal ways that humanity have been in the world for millennia trying to figure this out. As Karen Hunter said, you centered it before. I love this because it's just a children's story, but every line got the indictment, but not. And so then what happens is, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm just going to go and say, at this point, the fox, winter turns to spring. Fox returned to share what he had seen. He telling the first people, here go Fox telling them. Fox say the newcomers are hungry, Fox told the three sisters. They took Wichimung seeds, but they don't know how to help them grow. So then the animals have a meeting. Should these human beings help them crackers? Excuse my French. Here's where the trouble starts. Because the humans listen to each other and they listen to nature, and the animals had a meeting, and the animals said, you know what? Fox said, I wouldn't. I'll read this page because it's quick. Other animals came to hear what Fox had to say. We should help, Wichimung said. The corn. I agree, Beans said. Our home is their home now. I think we should too, said Squash. People help us grow. We must help, Deer said. We agreed to feed the people. In return, they care for the homes we share. See, the animals and the crops thought that these people were like the people they were dealing with. Fox been watching the whole time. Fox said, I wouldn't. The newcomers don't know our world. Lord have mercy. Sometimes the new people can seem scary, Rabbit said. The Creator tells us to help all living things. This is how the world works. Yes, Duck and Turkey agreed. It's settled. Poor Turkey. Turkey should have said. Anyway, it's settled, said Wichimung. We will send the first peoples to help the newcomers. This is the story they tell in their culture. It's a story of ingenuity and survival and grit, featuring Julia Roberts. No. This is human beings in a way of knowing that incorporates all of the universe, extending out to these people who have forgotten their way after having migrated out of where they came from, how to do that. And so they go on. The first people listen, then they go out and help these people, and then they eat. They come together. They had a harvest. The people come. The first peoples come over here. These people who they didn't save because the corn and the animals told them to, and they came and did that. All this talk is making us hungry. And what happened after that? You know what happened. They talk about it then at the end. In fact, they then go through how they tell stories, narratives. They tell you the different groups that are there. In fact, they say about the Wampanoag tribes, the Mashpee Wampanoag people live in Cape Cod area, Massachusetts, call themselves people of the first light. There were 69 Wampanoag tribes, not just one name. Yoruba ain't all the same people. Igbo ain't the same people. Who are these people? There were 69 of those groups living in southeastern Massachusetts at the time the newcomers arrived. These settlers included religious separatists, later known as pilgrims, and traders who were the first to colonize the Wampanoag homeland. Colonization is when a group of people take land by force from another group to permanently live there and control resources. Colonization had a devastating effect on all first peoples. Today, the state of Massachusetts at home is home to only 2 federally recognized tribes, the Mashpee Wampanoag and the Wampanoag tribe of Gay Head, the Aquina. It talks about the storytelling tradition, the Wampanoag feast, and I'm going to end with this one. I love this one here. Try, it says, a Wampanoag tradition of giving thanks. For the Wampanoag people, guardian spirits take the form of animals and plants, like Weechamoon, the corn, to watch over human beings. The Wampanoag people honor guardian spirits as well as loved ones who have left this world. Before special meals, they make a plate of food for the spirits to eat and place it outside. Try making a spirit plate at your next gathering in gratitude from plants, animals, and ancestors. Take a pinch of each food served at the meal and put a plate in a special place outside. When you make a spirit plate, think about people you love who have passed on. You can give thanks to plants and animals and make good wishes for others. It's a form of libation. It's a form of ancestral shrine making. This time last year, remember, I was in Nashville with my mom. Last time she was here, now she's an ancestor all around. You make a plate for her. My dear friend, Afia Zakia, Dr. Afia Zakia, we were in Alabama one time just outside of Tuskegee at a little diner for our Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations conference. This was around 1997. A couple of miles from where they're trying to get Bo Jackson, Charles Barkley. Y'all go over there with your master. Listen to your master's voice. Trying to get Coach Prime out of Jackson State and go down there in Auburn, Alabama. Go to hell. You can go to Tuskegee, but who have the Turkey Day Classic. You know, a lot of HBCU football was this weekend. And we sitting in there. It's about 7, 8 o'clock at night. We're getting ready to eat. And, you know, that Mississippi-born sister, Dr. Zakia, who is now the director of the Descendants organization in Mobile. We talked about her because when we were reading this, she took that job after we finished reading Barracoon. But Afia pinched off everything and then put an ancestor plate. That's the first time I seen one in person. And after that, that's the practice. You get ready to eat, you put a little something aside for the ancestor. You know. So anyway, The Wampanoag is a beautiful children's book. So let's wind up with what's going on now in this context. When you start talking about the question of what we do and how we can fashion out of our stories, out of our ways of knowing a we that didn't exist before, we have to understand that that becomes an exercise in common identity that we have to create. There are a lot of cultural similarities and there are a lot of cultural differences, but ultimately, politically, not even want to use the word politics. So we talked about that Monday too. We're going to come back to that in ways of knowing this coming Monday when we finish up, when we start our conversation. It's probably going to be a 2-week conversation on ways of knowing. Remember, the reading, which is there now, is from John S. Wright, the 20-page article, Intellectual Life, which is a very, very, very rich article on ways of knowing in Africana. We're going to take our time with this. This, in some ways, is the heart of the Africana Studies framework that we're dealing with. Governance is who we are to each other, but the who we is really begins with ways of knowing. And we got a glimpse of one indigenous way of knowing with this children's book. The question then of who we are and how to create a we out of who we are, this is where you see what are the sources. One source is indigeneity. If you are from a place, that's how we always, as human beings, identify ourselves. Where are you from? Who are your people? African people will always ask you that. Where are you from? In indigenous cultures, in places like the United States and Canada, resistance has always sprung from indigeneity. For example, when indigenous people literally occupied the island of Alcatraz in the bay off San Francisco, in the bay area. They proposed, having occupied Alcatraz in the 1960s, creating an indigenous school there, an indigenous college, university. Very important. But that would mean extracting out of all these thousands of different groups similar things that would allow them to form in some kind of formation for self-defense and things like that, and using that as a holding place to continue to reconnect to the indigeneity. That is the source. What happens when they take you across an ocean? And the culture that you have now, framing question 2 in our Africana Studies framework, which we'll talk about in part 2, how did Africans preserve and affirm their ways of life and use their cultures and identities as means to resist enslavement? They had to start mixing and matching, as Mike Gomez says, exchanging their country marks, as the generation before Sterling Stuckey writes, slave culture. You got to create a we. You're creating a we on the fly while they're trying to beat any notion of we-ness out of you and insert in your mind the memories of others. Well, therein lies the conflict. The other source is shared experiences. But shared experiences always can be connected to the before. And if you center the before, the shared experiences just become extensions of the before. And the before that you're extending back into isn't a before in a strictly literal sense, it's also a conceptual sense. So the Africana that emerges out of the shared oppression is one that is made necessary by the oppression, but not sufficient by the oppression, because the before you're tapping into is you're back mapping these commonalities into a time before the oppression began, and you're extracting out of that before commonalities. This is the work of Sheikh Anta Joe. This is the work of now. Let me pause here, because that work is incredibly difficult if you try to do it by yourself. That's why most academics, including Black academics, eschew it. That's why when we read the article I wrote, What Black Studies Is Not. Black Studies is not a celebration of yesterday, from slavery to freedom. No, you take that somewhere and you go back over with your master, because you letting them stick in your head from English, Spanish, and some old made up narrative, and you ain't even in it until Martin Luther King show up. And then you think you did something by saying, no, we had on some stovepipe hats in the 19th century. And then you think you really did something by saying, well, no, we came before the Mayflower. Okay, well, what about before the Mayflower? Oh, here we go with that. But you will dress up in a sheet and join the Junior Latin Society. But the minute an African comes and say, we're going to center the before, you want to start raising bloody murder. Why? Because there ain't no money in it, I guess. Or you scared, or you don't think we can do it. And all that we can deal with. We've all been there. We all live there. But we can center our before. So let me wind this up. And I'll resist the urge. Maybe we'll do this one night, or maybe we do this next week, or whenever. I was thinking about it, because when I bought this Chief Seattle book, it reminded me back in 2015, the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations met in Seattle, Washington. And I gave a talk at that time on John Henry Clark. And I talked about John Clark's phrase that he borrowed. Well, I won't say borrowed. He kind of remixed it on being a timekeeper. A timekeeper, in other words, people who look at what he would call the latitude and longitude of history, and then look for the rhythms. What time is it? Borrowing from Queen Mother Moore. What's the hour of the night? Chancellor Williams, A View from the Bridge. How do you step back and look for patterns? And how can you then use that to build collectivity? Because again, this isn't anti anyone. In fact, it is the opposite. Just like these Wampanoag people try to say them people, our humanity lies in our cultural memory and our ability to contribute that to global humanity. Now people looking for sustainable energy. And are you really looking? Or are you looking to make some more money? Because we didn't talk about COPA and what they just did when all the oil companies sent up huge delegations over there to the climate change summit so they can make sure that renewable energy that wasn't under their control wasn't at the center of the final statement. And they were able to get fossil fuels, mentions of fossil fuels, out of the final communique. That's why they went over there. But at any rate, we've got to contribute our humanity. So the sources then, and I'll resist the urge. I want to talk about what I talked about back in Seattle. But we have to understand that our relationships to each other are not defined by the geography of the social structures we find ourselves in. This is Thulani Davis's new book, The Emancipation Circuit, Black Activism, Forging a Culture of Freedom. I mentioned this before, but I'm evoking it again now for this purpose. What Thulani Davis is writing about is how African people in the United States during Reconstruction and after created these networks of meaning that overflow any particular state or local boundary. And that's where we end today, with two states in the Confederacy, the state of North Carolina and the state of Tennessee, where the hillbillies are bleeding at the top of their bleated voices because the American Negroes don't look at HBCUs just based on what state they're in, but on who we are to each other. You see, back in the 1960s, when the student movement was riding high in this country, you had African people who were going to HBCUs who were part of that work, part of that struggle work. Southern universities, we talked about last week, where there were murders. Jackson State University, where students were murdered. South Carolina State University, so-called Orangeburg Massacre. So not just Kent State University, these things going on. One of the things that these hillbilly governors, these white nationalist governors and state legislatures, and who thought they could control HBCUs through their presidents. And if you read Shelter in the Time of Storm, my brother Jelani Faber's book, he walks through how some of those HBCU college presidents found themselves with impossible choices. Some of them expelled students. It happened to Tennessee State. It happened to Felton Clark at Southern University. Others fought back differently. Others were relieved. There's a whole history of that back and forth. By relieved, I mean fired, let go. Jelani walks through all that history. He's at North Carolina A&T, by the way. But one of the things that emerged out of the 1960s was out-of-state caps. What is an out-of-state cap? That means that these hillbillies, because they were busting the doors down to go to Valdosta State in Georgia. I mean, people from all over the country were just trying to get to Troy State in Alabama. They were clamoring to get to Texas State University in Texas. Wait, no. So they put a cap on. They said, we're going to put caps on because we want these schools to serve the population of the citizens of our state. That ain't the only reason you put that cap on. In fact, that ain't the primary reason. You did that because Black people who undertook the Great Migration would send their children back to the HBCUs in the states that they went to, that they came from. So if you want to see a bunch of Chicago Negroes, go to Jackson State University. When I was at Tennessee State, the first people I knew well from Chicago were people whose parents had migrated, or from Detroit, whose parents had migrated from Alabama, and then who went to Tennessee A&I, or who knew about Tennessee and sent them there. North Carolina, you see the migration patterns from Philly. Norfolk State, you come up to East Coast. South Carolina State, Claflin, you come up to East Coast. Virginia State, Norfolk State, you come up to East Coast. You see people in Maryland, people in Pennsylvania, people, they send their children down. And ain't no HBCUs in California, so when they came, they picked the schools they wanted to go to. Howard University is from everywhere in the African world. It's the international HBCU in the United States. Well, the hillbillies don't leave their little patches. They wish they were in the land of cotton because old times they are not forgotten. So they put these caps on. Fast forward to this year. I'm sure everybody saw, if you're not in the United States, you saw in Tennessee, for example, the Tennessee Finance Ways and Means Committee, a hillbilly named Bo Watson. They want to get rid of the president of Tennessee State, Dr. Glover, Brenda Glover. Some of y'all AKAs, she was y'all media past bachelors. Good sister. An accountant by training, also PhD. She was on faculty at Howard for a number of years. And then she went to be the president of Tennessee State University. She's an accountant by training. JD, law degree too. Yeah, law degree, doctorate, and you're a certified accountant. Yeah. You know what they accuse her administration of? Messing up the books. They got to go through the accounting. And you know who was in charge of going through it? The comptroller of the state of Tennessee. Remember that story a few months ago about Mason, Tennessee? Because Ford wanted to put a plant outside of Memphis, and these white boys trying to figure out how they're going to take the control of that town from the Black leadership. So they accused them of messing up the books. Guess who's control of looking at Tennessee State books? This Trump supporter named Jason Mumpower. Yeah, the state of Tennessee comptroller. This is a hit. You understand? And they had an education committee meeting, and this hillbilly Bo Watson, y'all saw the clip. I'm trying to understand. I talked to the president of the University Tennessee Chattanooga, and I asked him. I said, "Why can't you get no more African Americans to come to your school?" And he said, "Well, we can't just enroll them. They're going to Tennessee State." And I want to know, Dr. Glover, why shouldn't we be trying to get these African Americans to go other places than Tennessee State? In 1984, there was a federal district court judge named Thomas Wiseman who signed off on a consent decree, stipulation of settlement, between the state of Tennessee, Tennessee State University, some plaintiff interveners, and some various assorted parties. And they said that Tennessee State must lose its racial identity by 1990, mid-90s, like 95, 96. It must become 50% white. We'll set aside some seats at the University of Tennessee Law School for some Negro students and maybe some professional schools, but Tennessee State must lose its racial identity because, you know, we must have what they would call, Derek Belknap called colorblind constitutionalism. In other words, no school should have a racial identity. Well, let me be very clear. Every damn school in the state of Tennessee, except the HBCUs, are HWCUs, except if you come and watch University of Tennessee play football on Saturday. When they scream Rocky Top, you think you might get lynched. But at any rate, the federal judge is like, the burden of integration gonna fall on the HBCU. Y'all play these black schools. That's how they end up trying to push them, and they finally get into the OVC because you're playing Grambling and Southern, you're playing Florida A&M. No, hell no. Those are black schools, and it makes you racially identifiable. So we play UT Martin and Austin Peay. That makes us non-racially identifiable. Yeah, those are white schools. Austin Peay literally named for a white governor of Tennessee. Don't matter. You understand the power of whiteness lies in its invisibility, as we've talked about many times. So when we say desegregate, that means become white. When we say integrate, that means become white. Well, now we got a problem because they put those out-of-state caps on. And what they did, when they grilled Dr. Glover before the Tennessee legislature last week, they said to her, among other things, now the books, they're going to fix that. But they want to get rid of her because they said, why you let all these students in? What you mean? Tennessee State let in, I forget the number. They let in, they let in so many students. I think they may have let in a freshman class of like 3,500. They let in so many students, they didn't have any place to put them. But remember, the Tennessee legislature issued a report a few months ago that said Tennessee State has been shortchanged by hundreds of millions of dollars, and the racist governor of Tennessee, Bill Lee, promised $215 million as a payment this year to Tennessee State, and they're building dorms as we speak. But these hillbillies, his brothers in the Klan-adjacent Tennessee State legislature, and when I say Klan adjacent, let me tell you, these are some of the same white boys who voted against taking out the bust of Nathaniel Bedford Forrest, the founder of the Ku Klux Klan, for whom Middle Tennessee State University's mascot was modeled after the Blue Raider until we raised holy hell because we had to play him in the OVC, and the brothers would come play basketball. We'd be in the gym talking about, what the hell is a Blue Raider? Do you know that's the founder of the Klan? And so they finally changed the mascot, but kept the name, just like Ole Miss, still called Rebels, but they changed to a black bear or something from Old Red, but you kept the name. Anyway, the point is that in that process, they haven't given the money, and now they talking about fining Tennessee State because they got too many out-of-state students, and you let too many students in. Fast forward to North Carolina. What happened in North Carolina? Well, the UNC system also has a cap for out-of-state students. They put that one in place in 1986. For every public university in the state of North Carolina, there's a cap on out-of-state students. In 1986, it was no more than 18%. Is it every? Is it every? No, there was one school that was exempted. No, it's not North Carolina A&T. No, it's not Winston-Salem State. No, it's not Elizabeth City State. No, it is the North Carolina School for the Arts. You ain't got no talented people in North Carolina that you should be serving first? Well, it's the arts. Well, you know, HBCU is closer to that because these people not just going for Aggie pride because they from North Carolina. They grandma may be from North Carolina, or they might be like J.R. Smith. But you want to put a cap on them black people coming into the state. But guess what? The University of North Carolina, the people want to go to, paid a fine. They went over their cap 2 times in 2 years, and in 2016, they paid $1 million fine. So A&T ain't the first one. And in fact, A&T, the legislature, through the board that governs the public schools, they gave North Carolina A&T a 4-year cap raise. North Carolina Central, which playing in the Celebration Bowl in a couple of weeks in Atlanta versus Jackson State football, twice in the last couple of years, they exceeded their cap because people are going to HBCUs. These young people coming to HBCUs, y'all. And the North Carolina legislature, North Carolina Board of Governors, the University of North Carolina Board of Governors, allowed them, they exempted them from the fine in 2021. And in 2021, the board raised the cap to 25%. So the news y'all saw in the news this week where they fined North Carolina A&T $2 million because they let in too many out-of-state students, That's even with the cap raised, and it's only going to get worse. And I talked to the young people who run the North Carolina A&T student newspaper when they were here, when Nicole Hannah-Jones started her Center for Journalism and Democracy, and there were HBCU students there. And I had spent a long time with the Texas Southern students and the North Carolina A&T students in particular, just listening to them. One of the things they're concerned about is something I was concerned about when I was their age at Tennessee State, and they tried to put this mandate on us. And by the way, Tennessee State is still hella black. No, you couldn't do it because you can't bust people to college. You dumb people. We used to call press conferences with all kind of things we do. Had a white student at Tennessee State be the main spokesperson for white people everywhere. Oh, we had these people twisted around. We had a good time messing with them. But these young people told me, they said, we're kind of concerned because A&T is growing like leaps and bounds, and there are a lot of students coming, but they're also kind of going out of their way to get these white students. And I thought to myself, I've seen this show before. I saw Gail Sayers do it. Y'all stop chasing these people. Your children want to come home. It's okay to be who you are. Take a page from our indigenous kin. Be who you are. Start at the source. Start at the before. No, there weren't HBCUs in Africa, and you ain't got to claim University of Timbuktu. No, you ain't got to claim Luxor, but they were centers of learning, as Du Bois tried to tell you for 60 years in his speeches at HBCUs. That must be the grounding that informed you. Du Bois said if a French university is French, a German university is German, what is a Negro college in the United States of America? It is not an imitation white school. And when they change these laws and desegregation happens, you're going to have to answer the real question. And the real question is race and culture. So while these hillbillies scream bloody murder because your children want to come home, you organize and break their backs. You break their political backs, and you overflow the boundaries. And if they want to take your tax money away from these schools, you organize and you go to political war with them, and you make them pay a price that's so heavy that they can't do nothing about it. And if Deion Sanders leaves Jackson State tomorrow, you young people thinking about where to go play football, don't follow him to Oklahoma, because in a year or two, when they find out that the Magic didn't transfer, watch how quick they're going to put him up on some old ridiculous stuff, catch him somewhere doing something or not doing something and say, see. No, because the Magic don't transfer. But I suspect Deion knows that. Let's stop for today, bro. Let's stop for today. So,
speechless, and thank you. Thank you. I'm in this chat. So many great suggestions and feedback.
Oh Lord.
Yeah.
PWI. I see. I'll be spending the afternoon reading this.
They say it's making me depressed. It's wherever we are. Listen, wherever we are, wherever we've been, we start here, putting it together. We've all made decisions and had thoughts and done things based on what we've been indoctrinated to do. There's no shame in that. The 400 years is a long time to beat the drum.
Right.
It's a long time. Like that any of us have any freedom whatsoever is a testament to our ancestors, period. But they did a lot of work. You held up cards in different languages to indoctrinate. I mean,
yes.
And all of us went to school from kindergarten, all the way through, indoctrinated with
actually that's an important point. That's a very important point. School is about socialization. In fact, there's a brand new book, maybe we talk about it next week, that traces the history of public education in this country. In the United States, beginning in the last quarter of the 19th century, coming forward, the war was over the curriculum. Because a lot of these white people come from Europe, and they would come with their cultures. And of course, there was the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1884. These people started saying, they're not going to be Americans unless we give them the story. And that's the foundation for this stuff to this day.
And isn't the war over curriculum now? CRT, let's ban the books. Like it's cyclical and it's willful and purposeful. So this is why we do what we do every Saturday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Come on now. They don't know about that. We are Saturday love.
That's right. Oh my goodness. So let's thank you. First of all, as always, I love you. I appreciate the time you gave me before we click live. I needed it. Because we have some decisions to make moving forward, centering us, centering the before. And
I love that. You got to do that one. Center the before.
I'm reached out to Ure as we're going, we have work to do. But all of this is possible because we've all made decisions. Like you said, you've devoted your whole life to dismantling this. And we all have to, be very willful and purposeful, even with the choices that we make in our entertainment, because you are informing the world, but also empowering the world. We have Black Friday, which is the day that most of these companies depend on your consumerism. And it's our $1.8 trillion that has literally bolstered so many companies, and they wait for this one day, this one weekend into Cyber Monday to recoup all of the losses and to put themselves in the black of all things. To put themselves in the black of all things, Dr. Carr.
In the black.
And that's a good thing, right?
We
So
talked about it last time. No, two Thanksgivings ago. Maybe next year, I'll finally go back to the Macy's parade. I thought about going this time, but I said I'm not going because there's a reason why Klaus is the last act. Santa Claus is the last float.
Yes.
Because he's waving, saying bye, but
y'all go back and watch that episode. I remember I was sitting there like,
yeah, the Macy's parade is all about that. I mean, my man is saying bye, B-U-Y. Klaus is there, and is it me or Prof? Did I see Christmas stuff go up earlier this year?
Christmas music, people's decorations, like it is. Where 'tis the season to make companies that don't invest in the Black community rich. That's how I put it. So.
Tis the season, yo. But Black Friday, but I don't get the sense. I know we wrapping up. I don't get the sense that they made as much money yesterday. Maybe, but I don't have any barometer.
As you said, we're getting more conscious. We are awakening, and this is problematic, as you mentioned, but it can't be stopped now. There's too many people who are paying attention and buying differently. Black Karen, that's her handle, said that we should, all the books should, because during the break, while you were talking, we were all looking up the book. And I'm like, we have a whole reference section with 300 bookstores in narrative, and it's sold out. It's sold out. So
is it?
Yes.
You know what? This is what I love. This is solidarity. See, this Indigenous Black solidarity. It's a beautiful thing. Oh, by the way, this is today's Small Business Saturday. I always lose track. I think Black Friday, Small Business Saturday,
Cyber Monday,
whatever, and then Giving Tuesday. Like, give a subscription to Narrative on Giving Tuesday.
I like that. And I don't push the way, all right. And
I know you don't push. No, I shouldn't say less.
No, but I think it's we should start, and that's my, because I hate that. I hate when people are like, oh, go buy this. I want people to come because their spirits are moved to, but maybe we can, give them some more salt. Yes. Giving Tuesday, give the gift of narrative.
For that little subscription fee, y'all see we work 24 hours, 7 days a week.
Yes, we do.
You're gonna get more than you. In fact, that ain't no money. And if you bought a master class for somebody, you need to call them people, tell them you want your money back.
I'm struggling. They advertising now on Sirius XM.
That's all right. But see, what the beautiful thing about it is, and I love the way we started this. Now 2 years ago, we pour clean glasses of water. Ain't no need in getting mad at them. Because my thing is, if you say Bill Clinton on his master class, if you want somebody to do something, you know what you do, and you tell them how they can help you. Okay, I watched this one time. I just spent $5,000. Where's my money? And then every Saturday we don't repeat ourselves. And you realize, see, the way you shut this stuff down is you pour a clean glass of water. That's why at Nicole Hannah-Jones' Center for Democracy and Journalism, we all stand there, and Jason Johnson, the first word out of his mouth, and the question he asked me was, Karen Hunter, you good? Why? Because I'm not MS. Oh, you talking about governance. And the question was, as he mentioned Roland, but he asked me, how does it feel to be in a space where you don't have to worry about, I spent my whole life in Black spaces.
I am free.
I'm free. And come to death row. No, I'm saying no, or not. Stay where you are. But see, what you're not going to do is bring your master's voice over here, or you can, but you're not going to be unchallenged. This is a space where we must have debates and discussions. And by the way, y'all, Monday night, John F's right. We're starting the ways of knowing. It's going to be a lot of different opinions. There's a lot of people in here when we read this Indigenous piece here. And again, I think about people who are Christian, Muslim, who would say, well, we pour libation. If we do this, I have some questions. I got some pushback. We want all of that because we're building a we. There's no we that exists. But you know who don't want it? Them hillbilly legislations in Tennessee and North Carolina, because they got a we where they stick you in and say you stay there. That's not what this is, y'all. We free over here.
We free. So get your global majority, black on black.
Come on.
black on black. It's a drop. It's limited, so I think it's going away December 2nd or 4th. So you just got a limited time. You know, there's other global majority stuff that you can buy.
It's less than a week.
Yeah. I mean, because I like things to be like, I'm thinking about Fabergé eggs and all of these quote unquote special things because they're rare. You can't, it's like, okay, why don't we create rareness and specialness in the things that we put out? So
I was almost assaulted for the Octavia Butler hoodie. I said, remember that commercial? What was it on Soul Train? That, can I get this? No, my brother.
Yes,
I get your own.
Yeah. Yeah.